Evening. Welcome to the Tuesday, April 15th, 2025 meeting of the Carrboro Town Council. Everybody finished their taxes. Y'all don't live in the mountains. Yeah, it's tax day. Tax day. Council members, could I get a motion to excuse Mayor Pro Tem Now, who will not be here this evening?
So moved.
Seconded, Madam Mayor.
All right, it's been moved and properly seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. And we will call up Liza next, our Carrboro Poet Laureate, to give us a poem this evening. Welcome, Liza.
Great. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Hi, audience. This is exciting to have so many people here. And some of the young people in our audience I know as poets, so that's exciting. I'm a little behind, and I know it's tax day. Happy tax day. But I wanted to first announce that on April 28th is Poetry, Popcorn, and Pie, 6:30 at the Drakeford Library Complex. All are welcome. We will have features and an open mic, so bring a poem to read. And I say I'm a little behind because we celebrated the Transgender Day of Visibility on March 31st. And I was going to bring a poem and then didn't bring a poem, so I've got a poem now, a half a month late, but still. And wanted to bring this poem because I feel like it was written during the pandemic, but it is uplifting and brings hope, and I feel like it's applicable now. Hello? Okay, so this poet is Kay Ulande Barrett, and they are the author of More Than Organs by Sibling Rivalry Press, and have received numerous prizes, awards in poetry from the Lambda Literary Award in Transgender Poetry and the American Library Association. And I just wanted to say a couple words. They were writing this during the pandemic and were feeling like things were really delicate. And so they were like, they said, millions live in contexts in which they are just trying to stay alive. I'm tired of resilience, tired of people risking the lives of others. The repetition in the form here that they're writing conveys exhaustion and a rhythmic frame too. Let's dream of something else. Poems can strategize and find a channel to exist without needing to prove that any life is worth living. Again, Kay Ulande Barrett. This form, you're going to hear it, and I don't always go on a whole rant of let me tell you about the form, but it is fascinating. So this form is called a duplex, and it was created by Jericho Brown, who is another big poet in the United States. And it's composed of 14 lines in 7 couplets with each, you'll hear the echoing of those couplets. And Jericho Brown said of the duplex, I decided to call the form a duplex because something about its repetition and its couplets made me feel like it was a house with 2 addresses. It is indeed a mutt of a form, as so many of us in this nation are now empowered to live fully in all of our identities. I wanted to highlight the trouble of a wall between us who live within a single structure. Okay, so you're going to hear the repetition of the lines. Again, Kay Ulande Barrett is the writer. Duplex for the sick and tired. A poem can spasm, stretch, but it can also let salve in. There aren't enough pages for the longing. There aren't enough pages for the longing drenched in medicine bottles and ice packs. Drenched in medicine bottles and ice packs, our aches sing beyond joints and stethoscopes in denial. Those who sing beyond joints and stethoscopes in denial, how do the symptoms stack your days? Let's name the stacks of dangerous symptoms. News coverage, the state, strangers who say the pandemic is over. News coverage, the state, strangers who say the pandemic is over. As I dream about a world that celebrates all of us. As I dream about a world that celebrates all of us fully. Let's allow poems to stretch. Let the salve in. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Liza. We appreciate it. I believe it's my turn. Let's see. I have a couple of proclamations. Let's see, we have Black Restaurant Week proclamation. Is Anita back there? Don't make me beg. Hello. Proclamation recognizing Black Restaurant Week. Whereas Carrboro celebrates its rich cultural diversity and the contributions of its Black-owned businesses to the community. And whereas Carrboro joins other communities across North and South Carolina in celebrating Black-owned restaurants. And whereas the town of Carrboro recognizes the importance of supporting local Black-owned restaurants which play a vital role in building intergenerational wealth, strengthens our local economy, and fosters a more inclusive, equitable, and vibrant community. Whereas Black Restaurant Week provides an opportunity to highlight the culinary talents, entrepreneurial spirit, and cultural heritage of Black chefs, restaurateurs, and food artisans in our community, including over 13 Black-owned restaurants and food establishments in Orange County. These restaurants represent a diverse range of cuisines for residents and visitors alike. And whereas the Flying Pierogi in Carrboro is an exemplary food establishment that contributes to the vibrancy and diversity of our culinary scene here in Carrboro. And whereas residents and visitors can find Black restaurants to support at www.orangecountync.gov 2566 Black-owned businesses, or find out more about Black Restaurant Week in the Carolinas at www.blackrestaurantweeks.com. Now, therefore, I, Barbara M. Foushee, Mayor of the town of Carrboro, North Carolina, do hereby proclaim the week of April 25th through May 4th, 2025, as Black Restaurant Week in Carrboro, and encourage all residents and visitors to patronize and support Black-owned restaurants and food establishments in Carrboro and throughout the region. This, the 15th day of April 2025. Thank you so much. Our Chief Race and Equity Officer, Anita Jones McNair, will pick it up from here.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for this acknowledgement. And certainly, please take the time to support our Black-owned restaurants next week and every week. So thank you so much.
Thank you. The next proclamation is in honor of Arbor Day. Is Gretchen here? Hello, Gretchen. Come on up. Proclamation in recognition of Arbor Day. Whereas on Arbor Day, we join thousands of communities across the nation and around the world to celebrate trees and promote the planting and preservation of trees, bless you. And whereas in an era where cities and towns are facing increasing challenges related to air quality, public health, and climate change, nurturing urban forests has never been more important. And whereas trees are critical infrastructure that mitigate climate pollution by sequestering carbon emissions and build resilience to the impacts of climate change by moderating the urban heat island effect and reducing stormwater runoff, flooding, and the erosion of topsoil. And whereas trees clean the air and water, produce life-giving oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees in our community increase property values and lower heating and cooling costs, boost the economic vitality of commercial areas, and enhance Carrboro's beauty and livability. And whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. And whereas the importance of trees is highlighted in the town's Community Climate Action Plan and Comprehensive Plan, which includes strategies to identify urban heat islands to determine where tree planting programs can be strategically located to reduce extreme temperatures and commit the town to take steps to enhance Carrboro's tree canopy. And whereas Carrboro has been recognized as a Tree City USA for 40 years by the National Arbor Day Foundation. And whereas, as the Arbor Day Foundation's chief executive, Dan Lambay, wrote in a letter congratulating the town on successfully achieving 2024 Tree City USA status. And I quote, "Cities that take care of their trees take care of their people," end quote. In this spirit, the town will join other communities in celebrating the national observance of Arbor Day by planting a tree at Wilson Park. And now, therefore, I, Barbara M. Foushee, Mayor of the town of Carrboro, North Carolina, do hereby proclaim Friday, April 25th, 2025, to be Arbor Day in Carrboro, this, the 15th day of April, 2025. And we have Gretchen, who's going to give us a few words. I would like to present this to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. What an honor to accept this Arbor Day proclamation. It is with great appreciation to the mayor, the council, and everyone in Carrboro on the town staff that works to promote upholding 40 years of tree protection, promoting 40 Arbor Days, and all the requirements of Tree City USA. Please remember that nature's future depends on us planting trees, planting native shrubs, perennials, germinating seeds, and perhaps even going to the North Carolina Botanical Gardens for an inspiration. So let us notice the natural beauty that surrounds us, and above all, let's celebrate the magic and the miracle of photosynthesis. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Oh, yes. Everything in the proclamation is just wonderful. I agree with everything.
Nice t-shirt. Thank you, Dolores Bailey of Empowerment. I'm going to acknowledge that you're here. And Dolores, she showed up for the Black Restaurant Week proclamation, and thank you for coming in spirit. Yeah, Anita got it, no problem. So we're down to the town manager's update. Town Manager Tony.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I quickly just wanted to acknowledge a new program we started this fall. It's called Carrboro Rise. And if the young people can start making their way up, this program we started because we wanted to begin engaging the voices of young people, this intergenerational opportunity to hear voices and for young people to learn about local government for potential long-term opportunities with the town. And so I know for sure there are future managers in this group. There's definitely a future director of communications and videography, Miss Ebony, and these are some great leaders. I want to acknowledge Riley Stahl. Okay, so I'm going to acknowledge Riley. Riley stepped up and got the department heads organized and created some opportunities. Go ahead, Riley, you can go to the microphone. You can't sit and talk there. And organized the event for me and worked with the students each week. So, Riley.
Right, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Town Council. It's my honor to be here to talk about the pilot year of Carrboro Rise. So as Manager Tony mentioned, Carrboro Rise was created through a partnership with the Town of Carrboro and Carrboro High School. It's a 10-week program in which we brought department heads from the town staff into Carrboro High School to discuss their roles here at the town, as well as discuss sort of their career paths to how they got into working in public service. So I would like to thank Carrboro High School principal, Dr. Helena Thomas, as well as Carrboro High School teacher, Mr. Matt Murchison, who's here in the office or here in the audience with us. They really provided the space that allowed us to create this great program. I'd also like to thank Town Manager Tony for having the idea to create this program and for entrusting me to bring it to life. It was definitely a pleasure to get to work with these students. We had 14 students apply, and they did actually apply themselves. They chose to spend their flex time in this program, which I think is really awesome that we have young people so engaged in local government. This will directly inform our resident academy that we are planning for the fall, which will be for residents of all ages, not just for high schoolers. And then I want to give a final thank you to the town council for supporting programs like this. We really love that we're able to plant seeds here in our own community, and I hope that Carrboro Rise will be just the beginning of a career in public service for these students. So now we have two students that are going to offer some brief remarks, and we'll start with Kennedy. No, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Kennedy Lytle, and I am a sophomore. This year I had the amazing opportunity to be a part of Carrboro Rise, and I loved it. It was so exciting to learn about the different roles that keep Carrboro running. I greatly appreciate all the work the town and Carrboro does to ensure our community is safe and keeps growing. My favorite aspect was learning about the Community Information and Outreach Committee. As a future photographer and journalist, it was very exciting to learn about how Carrboro reached out to the community and spread information to the community. I would also like to thank Mr. Murchison for inviting me to this amazing opportunity, and I hope to do it again next year.
Very nice. Thank you, Kennedy.
Hey you guys, I'm Madeline Wares. I'm a senior at Carrboro High School, and I just wanted to talk for a little bit about why I think these programs are important. Because I think programs like this mean a lot. So for a lot of young people today, especially those who pay attention to politics or are deeply affected by it, there is often a sense of an inability to change things, and that comes with a feeling of hopelessness as well. And this is where I think a need for programs like Carrboro Rise show up. Many teenagers are aware that they could spend their lives learning and campaigning and doing as much activism as they could, and they still wouldn't be able to solve huge issues like climate change, homelessness, systemic discrimination. But one thing that I didn't know going into Carrboro Rise was that every day all around us there are local governments focused on tackling these issues in our community. I could never stop the climate from changing. I couldn't. But here in Carrboro, I didn't realize this. There are whole teams of people that spend their day trying to focus on mitigating these effects and helping people who will be affected by it. Every time that I take a hike or turn on the lights in my house or go to a town event, there is an aspect of local government that makes sure that it runs smoothly and is there connecting all of us. So I think in a way, local government, this program showed me that local government is a difference between a group of people living near each other and a community. Carrboro Rise is important because it sheds a light on everything happening behind the scenes to keep our town working properly. It really, I think, demonstrated to me how powerful and impactful it is when you have a team of people like we have here working together to help us reach these common goals that we've set out. And especially meeting all these people from so many different departments, I was really struck by how everyone who came here did so because they have a passion for making change or for their career, and they all work together to help fuel that passion into something productive for all of us. So I really hope that the Carrboro Rise program continues not only to educate us about local government, but to inspire us to do something similar, especially in local government, whether it's as like a volunteer or a paid position. Thank you.
Thank you, Madeline.
We'll do another photo
Picture.
under the logo.
Do you want to bring them around here?
That's okay. That's okay.
Or you want us to move over there?
Do we need to move ourselves? Do you want to just switch one down?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that.
She has many cameras. Sorry, okay.
Rise Jaguars.
Do it!
Good job.
Good job. Everybody. Town Manager Tony, did you have more with your update, or that was pretty much it? So that was pretty amazing, young folks, some of our future leaders here in council chambers, so we thank you. I think Councilmember Haven O'Donnell had something before we get into public comment.
Yeah, just one quick announcement, and I want to thank, I know you arrived late, Dolores, but Dolores and Anita for announcing the Black restaurants and underscoring the importance. And that made me think to remind folks about the 25th annual Mildred Council Community Dinner, April 27th at McDougal Cafetorium at 1 o'clock. Get your tickets. It's one of the best events in Carrboro. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Haven O'Donnell. That is an important announcement. It's a great community event. So get your tickets and plan on stopping by. We're down to public comment period. I have 2 people signed up to speak, and I am going to start with Ms. Makita, Landings at Winmore. Welcome, Ms. Makita.
Respected Mayor and Carrboro Town Council, 2 weeks ago, I stood here today on behalf of the Landings Tenant Association, established in 2021, requesting fairness at the landings at Winmore. Your silence speaks volumes, but we won't fade. Community Home Trust is stripping our rights, taking resident spaces for management's gain, while chaining us to their rules. Equity demands you act. Restore the bike rack stolen in 2018 and return the community space that CHT seized in 2020. These aren't just amenities, they're pillars of equal access denied to those who need them most. Last time I was unable to explain the slide due to time restraints. But let's start with the bike rack. A symbol of how equity erodes when voices are ignored. The Carrboro Land Use Ordinance encourages amenities that serve all residents, yet this bike rack, vital for our silver level bicycle-friendly community, was deliberately removed. In 2017, the bike rack was replaced with a garden for one neighbor's personal use. You can see on here, eliminating the ability to store bikes at that location. In 2024, after we alerted the Carrboro Bicycle Coalition and they visited the property manager regarding the ongoing issue at the landings, a bench was installed, as you can see at the bottom, over the former bike wreck site, permanently blocking access for all residents and erasing its purpose. This isn't just a loss of metal. It is a deliberate barrier to mobility. Equity demands access for all, not gardens and benches for one. In 2020, CHT dismantled our computer community space. You see to the right? It was a vibrant community room where kids crafted and seniors bonded through Grow to Life classes. Then they turned it over to the management as their office. Then stripping the cozy couches and bookshelves in a large community room where celebrations and meetings were held. Community Home Trust and management expect us to follow every lease clause, yet they strip away spaces designed for our community's growth and connection. Equity is ensuring that families have rooms to thrive as the ordinance intends. Equity means holding CHT accountable. Enforce the ordinance by correcting the violation. Act now for a Carrboro where fairness isn't just words. Peace, love, fellowship, community.
Thank you, Ms. Makita. Next, I have Linda Carver, who will be talking about homeless people in the woods. Yes, ma'am. Come on up. Take your time.
Okay, thank you. So I'm gonna try to stand.
Okay.
Yes, homeless people in the woods. So my name is Linda Thompson Carver. Hello, everyone. And my problem is homeless people in the woods. And it's really Chapel Hill's problem, but we have Perry's Place. Thank you, Lord. And Perry's Place is a tale of two cities, Chapel Hill and Carrboro. So that makes it Carrboro's problem also. So it was built for affordable housing for many, and it has drugs in it. And we knew that was going to happen because it's low income, and that brings sometimes drugs. But what has happened is Sharon, who is the manager, has been diligent getting people out. So as fast as she sees it, she's removing them and bringing someone else in. But the homeless people in the woods across the street. This property is owned by Ted Parrish, and I went to Chapel Hill, and I was pretty much ignored, but I'm going back. But since Perry's Place is Chapel Hill and Carrboro, Sharon has pleaded with Chapel Hill and Carrboro for the police to come and help her, because when she gets off at 5, it's open season. When she's off on the weekend, it's open season. So the homeless people across the street, it's interesting because it's like they don't fear the police. The police go in. I'm wondering if they're getting paid. I don't know, because they don't seem to be afraid of them. And they're allowing them to be on a private property. It doesn't belong to them. I think if I went and I resided in a $1 million home, I think they would remove me. But these people are allowed to live there. One of them catches an Uber. Somebody's got some money. And the Uber picks him up, and they parking at Perry's Place. People, drug dealers, going into the woods to sell them drugs. My husband has reported one rape there. We have had 2 fires there. Tonight is windy. I don't feel like running. My husband has 5 oxygen tanks in the closet. He is a 23-year veteran of the Air Force. He has PTSD. There was one night, 5 bullets rang out. He and a friend sat on the porch, both of them with PTSD, veterans, did not run in the house, sat there. Bullets have no name. They can travel. They could have gotten killed. We need to get rid of the homeless people. Homeless people, some have mental problems, and I empathize with them, but they just cannot reside on private property.
Thank you, Ms. Carver. And the address you have here, is this Perry Place address?
No, that's my address.
Your address, okay. Thank you. I'm not sure about the,
Stand up there a little bit longer.
ma'am?
Did you want to ask me something?
No. I was really talking to Town Manager Tony about the property across from your house or across from Perry Place, or it kind of is both?
Goes from Manor Estates all the way down to the end.
Oh, so that Chapel Hill?
It's Chapel Hill, but with Perry's Place across the street, that I consider still as part of Carrboro, because they're parking, drug dealers are parking at Perry's Place.
So it's
going into
involving
the
both
woods.
jurisdictions?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Do you want to see who you can get in touch with, make contact, Town Manager Tony, in the interest of this? Ms. Carver?
Yes, we will look into it, Mayor.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you, Ms. Carver. Next, I've signed up Dolores Bailey of Empowerment, who wants to speak.
So I apologize. I really did mean to be here on time. I turned around, went back to my car, and in that second, that's how I missed it. But thank you for allowing me to speak, Madam Manager. Hello, everybody. It's been a while. Welcome to the board. I am Dolores Bailey, Executive Director of Empowerment Incorporated, and I'm here to share with you about the ribbon-cutting ceremony that's going to happen April 25th at the Peach Apartments. Peach stands for the Pine Knolls Empowerment Affordable Community Housing Project, and it's been 6 years in the making. I do want to say that I completely understand Ms. Carver's sentiment. Ms. Carver was one of the main citizens that helped Empowerment get its rental program going, so I get it, I know it. She said it's affordable housing, so naturally there's some mess happening. There is stuff happening, and it's happening everywhere. For the Peach Apartments, we will manage them as we do our 63 rental units. We are also trying to be very careful about selecting. This is low income. You're absolutely right. These are for people who make $10 to $20 an hour. But every place needs to be watched, and we all need to be vigilant. And this area is very close to the Peach Apartments. We know Pine Knolls. We know this area. When I say we, I'm talking about Empowerment, not. We know this area, but we know what has to happen is there have to be more eyes on the situation. And so what I am promising for Peach is that we will keep our eyes on the situation. A long time ago, and I've been at this 20 years, you guys, we used to clean the up north side, and the trouble would go to Pine Knolls. Then we'd clean up Pine Knolls, and it would go to north side. So this is systematic. It continues. We have to work together to make it stop. And here is Empowerment's commitment to do what we can to make it stop. I know there are drugs in the trees. I've heard about them and know about them. And I think the only thing we can do is work with the town managers and the police chiefs. And they know us. They know all of our commitments to make it change. It's going to take all of us, not just people that are black and brown, but like everybody that's in this audience. We have to do it. And there can be love that's done. I mean, it doesn't have to be arresting people. They have needs like everybody else. And I am begging, along with Ms. Carver, that we do something collectively. You can call me. Yes, ma'am. That's all I wanted to. Okay.
Oh, is that all you have?
That's all I had to say. 11 o'clock, April 25th. I want to see you there.
Thank you,
Thank
you,
you.
Ms. Bailey. So it's on my calendar, and hopefully there will be others that will attend, this really amazing affordable housing project put together by Empowerment, Inc., run by Ms. Dolores Bailey. And just in hearing you talk, I was reminded by Councilmember Haven O'Donnell, and also just thinking about our race and equity report, we also got a diversion report from our social worker. And so this sounds like something that maybe the social worker could get involved in, maybe the towns of Carrboro and Chapel Hill, to help the folks that are residing in the woods, and then the police do whatever they need to do in those situations. So, I mean, there are options, and so I thank both of you for raising those concerns, and the town manager will definitely look into it and figure out, next steps. So I appreciate both of you. So that's it for the people I have signed up. Is there anyone in the audience that has public comment on any matter? I will let folks leave that are planning on leaving before we move to the next item. All right, so there's nothing on the consent agenda this evening. So Town Manager Tony, we are at the general agenda. The first item, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The first item on the agenda is an information item. There is no action required, but this is on the agenda to make the council aware of some local legislation that is pending that could be detrimental around some of our land use and planning ordinances and what we are striving to do around local land use. So we have Code Right, Chad Meadows, our attorney Nick, as well as our interim planning director Tina, who is going to give an overview of this legislation. And if you have any questions, the three of them will tag team to jump in.
Welcome, Tina.
Thank you. And Mr. Joyner, do I share screen? Okay.
You need to minimize that in order to get your.
Great, thank you. Okay, now. Are we set, are we set? Is there another step? I'm sorry.
Did you choose share screen? Let me just take a look real quick. 1 second.
We need to turn this on.
It's the bottom right. Yeah. You drive.
Oh,
I can let you drive.
I got it now. Thank you. I didn't see that before. Okay, so.
You just choose screen right under the entire screen right there. Up. under
This one?
the-
This?
To the left, your left. Keep going, right. To the left. Up, 1. Choose that.
Oh,
That box right there. where
This?
You hop down, go down.
this one?
Yes, just click there. And then scroll down and do share.
Bottom center.
There we are.
Okay, my apologies. That was not what I was expecting. Okay. Okay, so good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
There's a lot here, so forgive me, I'm gonna, numerous bills have been filed, both houses, and before we jump in, I'd just like, let me see if I can move that over just a little bit. First off, a special thank you to Chad Meadows and his team for providing the list with the links that was in your packet. Invaluable resource for staff and for the town. The table that you have in front of you just shows those items that have been provided in that list that are highlighted in yellow. So we're just hitting the surface, and we're going to focus on the 3 bills that are here in the boldface font. And I will note that Mr. Meadows sent just this afternoon, maybe at 4 o'clock, an updated list of bills, and we can get those to you after the meeting. But just to let you know that we are still working through this and kind of digesting it as we go. I think it would be helpful to offer a couple of kind of overarching themes as we work our way through this. First, there's a real reiteration that North Carolina is the Dillon Rule state. Therefore, we only have those authorities as it relates to the zoning powers that are expressly given to us. And we are reminded more than once per bill. There's a shift away from legislative decisions to quasi-judicial decisions. As you may remember from the adoption of 160D, there was kind of an emphasis of getting away from conditional use zoning to conditional zoning, which is something the town uses quite a bit. Why that is so important is not simply the inclusion of conditions, but rather the process. It's the opportunity for the council to have broader discretion and the opportunity for the council to have conversations within the community. It makes it more of an engagement type of a process versus more of a legal, kind of a testimony type of approach. There's also some changes related to the conflict of interest. I have an extra slide in the back if you want to just look at those specific differences related to conflict of interest. There are also a number of cases where there is now a very short window for review, which is a little concerning for staff. And this affects both two rezonings as well as what we call administrative decisions or decisions that the staff makes. And there's another item in here which we can just touch on at the very end where there are also some pretty tight deadlines related to different development applications. Finally, and then also, this is new and rather alarming. There's some expanded personal liability opportunities, for lack of a better term, that affect both elected official and staff. So this is something I think we'll want to be very, very aware of. And then finally, again, related to the Dillon's rule, there's a real effort to kind of curtail local governments from having regulations that go above and beyond state and federal regulations. And because of that, that's why we've included Senate Bill 713, which has to do with limiting local government and environmental regulations. The town has long had stronger stream buffer requirements as well as stormwater management. And again, I'm grateful also that Marty is here to answer questions if you have them more specific to his experience. But just to reiterate, there's a lot here, and we're still kind of digesting it and trying to get an understanding of how this may affect day-to-day operations with the town. But with that, we'll do a deep dive. And as you can tell from the label on this particular file, this was a little bit of a team effort as we tried to make this digestible. And so we pulled out some of the legislation that doesn't really apply to the town in terms of being different, either because we do it already or the size of the population of the town is such that it didn't apply to us. But we'll just kind of jump in, and you're welcome if you want to pause to ask.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Tina. Councilmember Frey has a question.
Madam
or-
Mayor, because I know this is a long presentation, if we have questions, is it all right if we pop in the middle so that we're not trying to refer back to 8 slides ago when we get to the
Right,
end?
so it's whatever the council's pleasure is. If that's how you would like to proceed, I don't have a problem with it. Sounds like everybody's okay with that. So Tina, questions will pop in periodically. Do you have something now, Councilmember
I do not.
Frey? Okay, Tina.
Okay, great. The first one has to do, the first kind of new material, so to speak, is the idea of having this fiscal note requirement. This has to do with every time that there is some type of a new ordinance that staff would, and it's identified as planning staff, but I guess it could also be economic development staff, or we could bring in some other, such as a real estate person or perhaps an appraiser, would do some type of an assessment as to how that amendment would affect single-family housing costs. And that material, that information would need to be provided to the council 5 days in advance of the meeting at which it would be discussed. Things that are not on the slide but are also important, again, a reiteration of the police powers, a changing of the vested rights from 2 to 5 years for site plans and from 5 to 8 years for, did I say that right? Yeah, 5 to 8 years for subdivisions. And for those who aren't familiar with that term, that means if you have an approval, it is good for a certain period of time. The jurisdictional rule that has to do with when property is over 2 boundary lines, and this, what is the reason why we have this here and what makes it kind of interesting is it's discussed as in the framework of whether or not a jurisdiction has water or sewer services. So that's kind of interesting. Here in the town, we follow the Wasamba policy, which affects the Chapel Hill, Carrboro, and Orange County. So whether this would affect us or not, I think remains to be seen. But with our OWASA friends here, it seemed like a good one to point out in case you wish to have some conversation on that. And again, this one at the bottom related to timelines, this is a big deal. I know there is always interest in having reviews faster, I think, from staff as well as from applicants, but 14 days to deem whether an application is complete, both for legislative or amendments, as well as what's not listed there, but site plans, again, items that would be a staff approval, that can be tight. And then there's a window of time when the applicant would have to resubmit. And then there, from that point moving forward, there would be a total of 90 days to finish your review. And presumably that would mean to bring to whoever the approving body is to make that decision. Is there a pause there?
Councilmember Palmer.
Just right quick, so like reading between the lines, that combined with the personal liability, I read that and I thought, we're gonna have to hire more planning staff to be able to comply. And I know, I don't mean to super put you on the spot, I know you can't know right now, like how many person hours, sorry, that would take, but ballpark, are we talking like one additional full-time person to be able to do this as a town without risking liability to the town?
I think that's a very good question and one that I think we would want to talk about before giving an answer. But, you know, for those of us who have worked in local government for a while, applications tend to come in clusters. So we might have a period of time where something is either in process or it's being updated, or we don't receive something. And then it seems like they all come in within a couple of months. So the possibility of maybe somebody being on vacation or somebody being ill and trying to meet some of those deadlines, I think is something that we're very much aware of, what that could mean. And then finally, you can have a delay with,
I'm sorry, Tina. Councilmember.
No, I think you're about to answer my question.
Okay. There is an opportunity to delay the decision with the kind of mutual approval of the applicant, but that delay, that extension seems to be limited to 6 months. You know, just reading through this from a staff perspective, I think there are questions such as, what if you identify deficiencies as they're described, the applicant resubmits, and there are still deficiencies? You know, the way the language is written, it seems to imply that one kind of return and resubmittal would be sufficient to make it complete. I think those are some of the things that we will be trying to tease out, different staff among the states, of exactly what this means.
So now my question comes in. And maybe this is not for you, but Nick, like because of the language of, sorry, Mr. Attorney, because of the language of the bill, do we have some concrete kind of next steps on this piece? Like, for example, the question of does it resubmittal automatically kind of open the doors for an approval? Is there some kind of, I'm confused about the language. So my question is, do you have, or is there some kind of information that you can like read into that says here's a clear kind of how this works out, right? Because one of the things that I'm very worried about is some of this legislation that has come out in recent years is so open to interpretation. It doesn't leave clear instructions, and then that opens even further, right? So in my understanding that this is similar language, because that's my question. Is this similar language? Or is there any guidance that might be coming out here? What would you expect on this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, is this working?
Uh-huh.
Are you referring to the 14 days and the 90
Yeah.
max? That provision I read in its plain language that if you don't meet the 14 days and you don't mean the 90, and you don't have consent for an extension of time, then it's approved,
Okay.
okay? So as to that, at least as written, right now, I can't argue any wiggle room about that. But let me also clarify, because Mr. Palmer, he used the word liability, whether it imposes liability on us for not meeting that. That's a real problem that we'll talk about in a few minutes. But the hit that is taken here by not following the timetable is that it's approved. That's my.
Thank you.
Tina, a quick question, a real basic one on the fiscal note requirement. Is a fiscal note just a staff report with analysis of what the impact would be on housing costs?
I'm not sure.
As I was like, I'm looking at this, I'm like, what is a fiscal note in this context?
Well, all right, we're all guessing here, but my reading of it is that that's a requirement, but then I was looking for, well, what's the consequence in terms of, how it comes out, right? And there is no consequence. It's just a reporting requirement. But then the provision goes on to say, if you don't do it, somebody can make you do it, file a lawsuit and make you do it. So unless Chad or somebody else or Tina has any ideas, I don't see any consequence for not doing it other than that you're made to do it. And it doesn't matter how it comes out.
I was trying to get at whether this is a, thinking from the point of view of the drafter for a moment, is the idea that this provides a community with transparency into the impact on housing costs of an ordinance change. And then thinking of it from our point of view, is this basically just making any ordinance change much more expensive because we have to go get an analysis done for pretty much any change that could affect single-family housing?
Yeah, that may be possible.
Okay.
Yeah, I never thought through about how you come up with the data and how long it would take to come up with the data to file the report, right?
And-
It's a good point.
And does an ordinance change that only affects multifamily housing, as an example, but that plausibly has an effect on the cost of single-family housing? My point is, like, how many layers of knock-on effects are we going to be required to consider? And I guess the answer is, I don't know. The bill doesn't say.
So,
Yes.
The bill does say, prior to adopting, amending, or repealing an ordinance that could cause a net increase or decrease in the cost of constructing, purchasing, owning, or selling a single-family residence, then that local government must prepare a fiscal note. The fiscal note must identify and estimate for the first 5 fiscal years the ordinance is in effect, all anticipated effects on cost of the proposed change, whether it increases the cost of single-family home construction, ownership, maintenance, or it decreases those costs. The fiscal note has to identify that information for 5 fiscal years out from the date that the ordinance is adopted. And it is intended primarily for impact on single-family residential.
Thank you, Mr. Meadows. I think where I'm going with that is if the council were to, for instance, consider an amendment that makes it dramatically easier to build multifamily housing, and that we would therefore expect to, on average, increase the supply of housing and reduce the tax burden of a single-family homeowner, does that count as reducing the cost of owning a single-family home, and therefore basically any ordinance change would require one of these notes?
I understand the question. It's an absolute fabulous one. I think that's in the eye of the courts. I think if there was
I
a
love that. That's
citizen-
nice and clear. Thank you.
Yeah, I think they would be the ones who, if someone were to file a civil action, it would be up to the judge to decide yes or no,
reasonable.
this ordinance does or does not impact the cost of single family residential ownership or construction.
It's the vagueness of the language
Okay.
leaves it open for
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's my question.
anything. Councilmember, let's see, there's nobody else. Tina?
Okay. We've touched on some of these already, so I won't spend too much time on these. I think I'll just hit some of the highlights. So under grant of power limitations, I think some of the things that are most relevant to the town, we already know that there's some restrictions on design standards for single-family homes. That's been in place for a little bit of time already. Setting a minimum width or length for structures, that's something that's in our downtown design standards, so that would be some challenges. And again, some of these things related to road standards, I think might be a little bit of challenge for us. The reference in the next bullet section that has to do with zoning based on density, that would be a text amendment for us to change the way we frame things. Looking at the recommendation for the new standards for Carrboro, 5 units per acre would be kind of for us between R10 and R7.5. It would be a little bit less than 10,000 square feet per dwelling unit, so it gives you a sense of what impact that might have for the town. The conditions to approval, unless specifically authorized by law, this one is also a little bit challenging, and it's brought up in SB 688 as well, as to the ability, again, that we would have included in conditional rezonings to have a discussion with an applicant and potentially through a mutually agreed upon process offer some conditions to perhaps mitigate a development project of some sort. So it looks like we will be restricted as to how much we can do that. Sir?
Tina, does that section about not being able to add conditions to approvals, isn't there another bill in here that brings back the conditional use permit?
We've noticed that. Thank you for bringing
Then
that up.
the two are directly contradicting each other, yes? So this is saying you can't add conditions to approvals, and the other one's saying we're going to bring back a process that adds conditions to approvals?
Well, maybe, maybe not. I think in this case, this is more related to kind of the conditional district process. The conditional use permit is a little bit of a mystery to us, and I think we're wondering if that might be a typo, because conditional use permits were removed as part of the adoption of 160D.
Yeah.
So that's one we're doing a little bit more research to try to get a handle on that one. And again, the density yield, again, it's the same kind of thing we've been talking about in terms of developments for subdivisions. Moving forward, we've touched on this a little bit, and I just wanted you to kind of see, kind of bulleted out some of the language here. This is a little unnerving, I think, for staff as well as for elected officials to see the opportunities that are expanded for applicants to seek some type of a legal process if they're not pleased with the results of a decision. So I'll just kind of pause here and let you look through these, and then we can move on.
I mean, I'm looking at Nick. Do you? You said, huh? It's particularly for, well, all of it, but section 17. I'm just act with malice, arbitrariness, capriciousness, or unlawfulness. How do you put your finger on that, right? It would be up to a judge, I guess, based on.
Sorry, but you're talking about taking, you're talking about personal liability. Is that what
Yeah.
okay. Well, it's a fascinating paragraph because it starts off with certain kinds of standards like arbitrary and capriciousness, which is that there's no rhyme or reason to what you did, which is what that means. But then, and this is true in the Senate bill, if it's unlawful, just if it's unlawful, it uses that word, and someone correct me if I'm not right about that. So if you enact an unlawful regulation or land use development ordinance, that alone opens you up to personal liability for actual damages sustained as a result of that. You all see the significance of that. This is a complete abrogation of the doctrine of sovereign immunity, which applies to the state in certain circumstances and to the local government. And generally speaking, today it applies to the local government, except to the extent that you purchase insurance with respect to the particular matter. And so if today you were to pass an ordinance or development regulation that was unlawful, the most that could happen is the judge strikes it down, right? But now there's the specter of personal liability, and the only other observation to make on that, since you brought up the point, that's going to implicate what insurance y'all need, you know, to guard against personal liability, because the way things happen today, all of your acts are done in your official capacities, right? And so even if there's a damages claim there, that's covered by the league. Anyway, it's a very serious problem, and the bottom line is, if it's merely unlawful, that's what it literally says, you know.
Madam Mayor,
You're
may
open
I?
to that, yeah.
Just a couple of, two follow-up parts for me. One, it's not on the slide, but a thing that popped out to me was the discovery piece. Like, my mom having been a party to a lawsuit and being in the right, that was a 10-year process, and she was subject to discovery, and there's a lot of stress there. And so that immediately was a flag for me. So one is the discovery piece, but the other is, like, my understanding is acting in my official capacity. Right now, you represent us, right? But this personal liability bit, to what extent do we as individuals need to retain our own counsel in order to be able to serve?
I think that what would happen if this passed is that all members of the council would be under some kind of insurance policy, you know, to specifically insure you against that potential liability. If that were the case, then the insurance company selects who your lawyer is.
So then that's an additional cost to the town.
There's an additional, and other than, and I don't mean to belabor, but Mr. Palmer, other than the anxiety and time-consuming aspect of litigation, the problem with this provision is also that it makes your decision-making difficult depending upon how risk-averse you are. So if you're looking to your lawyer is always going to be advising you, well, if there's any doubt, don't take the risk. But that may be of no comfort to you, because different folks on the council have different levels of risk-taking in terms of their vote about this.
Thank you. Mr. Attorney, so my understanding is that the section 15, 16, and 17 intersect with each other. Yes, these are interacting.
Yeah.
So that liability policy that you're talking about would also, if I'm understanding this right, have to cover every member of an advisory board that has a role in the development process, and every member of the PZI department as well.
Yeah, as I recall, and you all have to just correct me, because, you know, absorbing this is difficult. I think staff members can be held liable too.
It
Like
says,
a town
it says
manager?
well, it says
Town manager?
administrative staff, so.
Yeah, I'm looking at the language,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, and so we'd have to have some insurance policy that prevents the planning director from taking a hit, you know what I mean, or any other administrative official that makes a decision.
It would also include appointed boards.
So as an example, okay.
Planning department.
Well, planning board's an
It sounds like-
advisory group, right?
Planning board is an advisory group, I think maybe not then, but the Board of Adjustment, on the other hand.
It's different.
Yeah, that's hard to say, though, you know, as a quasi-judicial body.
Well, I mean, it's because they're empowered to give a variance. As an example, if the Board of Adjustment denies a variance,
Yeah.
then aren't all of the members of the Board of Adjustment individually liable for having taken that vote?
I don't know. I don't know whether it would apply to a quasi-judicial body.
Yes.
That's a great question. I don't know the answer.
They make a decision. They are the
Thank you.
Yeah, but I just do not know. I mean, my immediate gut reaction is, if that were to happen, just on at least what I've been reading, is to argue to the court, well, this is a this is not part of the staff, you know what I mean? Well, it says appointed board members, but I mean, I need to go and parse out
Yeah,
what it
I
is
understand,
here.
Mr. Attorney, that you'd need to look at the detailed
They're
language. But
serving a
if it,
judicial function.
but if it looks like they're looking to sweep in everybody who is involved in making a development decision.
Whatever it is.
I believe that's the intent.
Yep, that's the intent.
My follow-up question here, now there is, it's nice that there is protection eventually if you did not violate due process. This is a list of things that nobody should be doing in the first place. The problem is that every single time you end up going to a court to prove that you did none of those things at the cost of the town's insurance.
Well,
The point I wanted to make is that you're not just being sued for making a decision. You're being sued for making a decision, and then you have to go and prove that you did not act with malice, capriciousess,
Yeah, well, the
arbitrariness,
burden is going to
unlawfulness,
be
et
on the
cetera.
other side, and then there are different, I mean, theoretically, you could have made the right decision, but then violated the certain due process rights, which would then be somehow actionable.
Okay. My last question on this one, this last bullet point here, local governments cannot regulate development through general ordinance making power alone. I'm not quite following, Tina, what that
What does it mean?
bit means.
What does it mean? Yeah.
Can
saying
I
that- it's
can
sort
I
of saying-
answer that, at least as a
Please,
thought?
Mr.
And you
Attorney,
got to
yeah.
understand, we're thinking this through. I believe that what's going on here is essentially that that what the legislature is doing is abrogating everything we know now about your general ordinance-making power, limiting your power to that which is expressly permitted by statute.
That's right.
Okay,
Right.
that's really what's going on.
Yeah.
And so, and there's actual, I'll share with you, because it's such an important point about this bill, is notwithstanding any provision of law, a local government may not exercise planning, zoning, subdivision, or development regulation authority except as expressly authorized by this chapter. I think that's what's
Just putting the
going
teeth
on.
in Dylan's rule here.
Yeah, it's eviscerating the powers that you have
Of municipal
had
government, yeah.
since whenever we started all this.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just weigh in. I'll give you a real world example. There is nowhere in the general statutes in 160D that says a local government can apply landscaping standards. It is possible that if 765 were passed and somebody brought suit against Carrboro for your landscaping standards, you would lose because you're applying a provision that is not express in the statutes. Same is true for tree protection, same is true for inclusionary zoning, same is true for many of the things that you're using conditional zoning for that are not expressed in the statutes. Your police power gives you that authority that is being clawed back.
Thank you, Mr. Meadows. So as I understand this, in the event that this passes, we will go through the ordinance with a rather big knife, and we will take out everything that is not in 160D, which is many provisions that folks in Carrboro hold dear.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
It's possible that this could be the first step towards a statewide single zoning ordinance that's applied to everybody, and there are no more local rules.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
This is the tricky part, because here's the thing, it's admirable to say, right, no official should violate due process, no official should use outside evidence and quasi. These are the standards that we're already held to. This puts teeth into them. The problem is that this penalizes jurisdictions that do not violate these rules also. Right, this is aimed at jurisdictions that, I guess in the view of the General Assembly, have abused their local authority, the consequence of which is every municipality pays through the nose to address this.
Yeah, Chad, I really appreciate what you were just saying about giving the example of landscaping and tree protection, which are just two key examples in Carrboro that are really important to us. Is it possible for us to request that between the planning department and the work that you're doing with Carrboro, that we could have a punch list of those things that are red flagged?
I think we could absolutely try to identify some of the more significant things. I think that could be a fairly lengthy punch list. I'll just note for you that there are also, there's nothing in the statutes necessarily about required parking. And the list goes on.
Yep, exactly.
And I think by the time we get to the end of it, quite a bit of stuff in your LDO is on that list.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
Because
I-
I'd rather we know up front what we could be up against, because it's a significant challenge for us in Carrboro.
Councilmember Haven O'Donnell, are you requesting that we, at a future meeting, talk about changing the scope of Mr. Meadows' statement of work? Because I mean, he's got a charge.
I'm asking what, going forward from the scope of work, okay, if it would be beneficial for us to have, you know, a punch list over time. It's not something that would be, you know, done within, I don't know, 6 months. But do you see what I'm saying? Because I think this presents significant challenges to what Carrboro has always done and aimed for. And we would want to know up front, you know, rather than finding out later.
Town Manager Tony had a comment, and then Councilmember Frey.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to point out that this is still a proposed bill,
Moving.
Right.
and that there are many entities in opposition of this bill, and including the League of Municipality and some other municipalities. So I think I don't want us to. I think we need to be prepared and aware that this is coming forward, and we will watch it to see if it makes it out of the House. And if it does, then we can step up kind of our processes and how we should start preparing. Still would have to go through the Senate. So I don't want us to overreact too early. Just be aware of what, I mean, even the first few slides is enough to cause concern. And so we will prepare you all as we get closer if this builds momentum.
Thank you, Town Manager Tony. Councilmember Frey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My point was that Mr. Meadows' statement of work already includes statutory fit, and as I'm hearing it right now, there is no direction from the council to change his statement of work yet.
No.
Councilmember Posada, did you have?
Yeah, sorry, yes, Madam Mayor, sorry. Thank you. No, my comments were gonna be exactly what the town manager brought up, right? I'm looking at just how much movement has been in this bill since it first began, and even there seems to be quite a little movement before it even gets to a committee. It will be heard tomorrow at 3 p.m. There is no PCS at the moment, but I do expect that at some point, before it reaches the subsequent Judiciary 1 and then rules, I imagine if this moves forward, there will be some kind of PCS because of all the problematic sections of it and everyone that's working against it. So I think it's a little early for us to kind of like move too much on this. It is important for us to keep an eye on it, and it's important for us to kind of figure out what are the pieces, should we decide to take any action in advocacy on or against this bill, what are the things that we would want to remove or want to have removed in order for this bill to move forward? Because there's a lot of pieces in here that are useful, while there's some that are detrimental. So I like the fact that we're going through this, and I would want to continue the slides to kind of figure out what are some of the things that if we do any advocacy points, we would want to take out. There is still quite a bit of movement. We have, of course, housing, we'll see it tomorrow at 3 p.m. We don't expect Judiciary 1 to meet until 2 weeks from after that because they're taking a break next week, so there's no meetings. So as soon as this would come back into a conversation or a committee would be late April, then it has still to go to rules, and then the floor, looking at the fact that crossover is, big, May 8th. So if it makes it past crossover, then I'm going to be a little bit more concerned. For now, I like the fact that we're talking about it and we're figuring out what are the points that we would want to fight against, because of the fact that if it makes it past crossover, then my stance would becomes very real. And also looking at the sponsors, if this makes it to the floor, it will pass bipartisan as it stands now. If it makes it into a veto override, that will be demolished in a second. Again, a lot of things moving in between that now and then, so I'm not too worried at this point. But I do like the fact that we're reviewing these different sections.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Posada. And we'll turn it back over to Tina.
Thank you.
Sorry to have you standing there all this time. This is a lot to chomp down on.
It's a lot.
Thank you.
And again, you'll see, as we keep talking, as you've mentioned, you'll notice some parallels between the two bills. Some of these are kind of interesting, and we included some of these items about driveway locations, traffic flow, and things of that sort, because actually elements of these have come up in a couple of our recent approvals, and so it's kind of interesting to see how these have come forward. The water and sewer capacity, I think, is particularly interesting because there's a line in there that has to do with whether something is moving forward or whether something can be afforded. I think it would be interesting to have a better understanding of what exactly is meant by some of those terms. So we'll continue to review these as they move forward, hopefully or not. And then also things that have come up for local residents related to OWASA about whether or not one needs to connect, whether they are allowed to connect by the existing policy, and how those types of things affect development. Okay, so we're going to shift to the Senate version of this bill. I'll go through this a little bit more quickly because you're going to see the common themes. Again, this emphasis on authority related to those authorities provided in the police power for zoning and development. Again, you see some of these design standards which are already in place, but some of the things related to minimum distances for buildings, something I noted earlier that we use. The parking standards, those types of requirements, both dimensions and number of parking spaces other than ADA are being removed. The fire apparatus access road, that's kind of interesting. That number of units to be served by one access road just went up quite a bit. And so that's something we are always reaching out to the fire chief to get input on. And again, another one of these automatic allowance of a certain number of dwelling units by right. And I know that that's something that I think for some of us sounds like a really good thing. I think the question is just how would that go about? Just allowing pretty much anything to occur, maybe a good thing, may not be. I think those are some of the things that you kind of need to see how those transpire, who the developers are, what things look like, what type of impact things have to a community in terms of tourism or feel or things of that sort. So just stuff to continue to watch. The point of this slide, again, is to talk about conditional districts and what we talked about in the previous bill about the ability to ask for or for an applicant to offer a condition, even voluntarily, that may be considered outside of our parameters. So something just to keep an eye on. some of these other things are perhaps more design related in terms of harmony. I think it's really interesting to this B1 limitations about affordable housing, because the question is how much affordable housing is needed for this to kick in? Is it one unit? Is it a lot of units? I think those are things that we're trying to get a handle on. And again, we talked about this at the very beginning, the adoption of zoning or development regulations, so that would be both a map and text amendments that would now follow a quasi-judicial process or procedure instead of a legislative process. So losing a little bit of control, having to follow a standard process. And as part of this, there's also a requirement that the consistency statement that the council would typically adopt as a rezoning, that is normally not subject to judicial review. It would be allowed in one of these bills that it would now be subject to judicial review. So not just following process, but also potentially the meat of that, the content of that provision. Again, I think we've talked a lot about liability, so unless there's something specific that you want to touch on, I'll jump past this one. This is one that we that we added kind of at the last minute, and that's why there's still a lot of text on the slides, but I thought you would want to be aware of this specifically laid out removal of local government to have additional environmental requirements. And the timeline of this would be to remove those from the ordinance by the end of the year. So kind of a big deal for us. And I was going to stop at that point, but this might be, if I can just jump ahead real quick. For the conflict of interest, these are the differences would be for quasi-judicial, the two underlined texts, having a fixed opinion in advance, as well as we've talked about, the ex parte communication. And I just wanted, I know this is hard for the audience, but for the council members, this zoning map shows what is currently R7.5, R10. It just gives you a sense of what would be the impacts of those changes. So I'll jump back. I just wanted you to have that visual.
Thank you, Tina. I think Councilmember Haven O'Donnell had a question.
This just on Senate Bill 700, create the Office of Engineering and Codes. Is there any explanation for why the state fire marshal would be removed as being responsible for building codes, and that it would fall to a state engineer?
I would have to research that, unless Mr. Meadows or Nick, if you've looked at that.
It would be speculation as to the motivation behind that. So yeah, it would just be rampant speculation. Not sure why that's being proposed.
Wow.
So,
Doge efficiency? I'm just asking.
Control?
Yeah,
yeah,
that's what I'm talking about.
at the risk of wandering into speculation. Or you're still going, sorry.
No,
please.
my next question, and it may be premature, has to do with the environmental requirements. And I'd just love to know how many of the requirements in Carrboro exceed. So for example, I know the Jordan Lake rules is one of them. And I'd be interested to see that at some point, please. Yeah.
Yeah, I just, in reading these in totality, that part of what I was struggling with is like, what is the purpose of a city after they have stripped this much of our power? And I flashed back to the local government training that I did when I first started, and I, for one of the 2 days, I was at a table with representatives from Mills River a much smaller than us community, and they were very excited because they got texts like during that day that they had gotten a local bill that restored some of their power. This is the downzoning. Y'all remember at that time, and so like the net effect is that it resets to 0 except for local bills. So where does that leave us with respect to the legislature as it stands?
Oh, we won't find out. Councilmember Posada.
Yeah. The only thing I want to mention as we look at these is just want to share how I look at these bills. Maybe that's helpful or it may not be, but either way. If you're trying to find a reasoning for many of these things, you're going to have to pick a reason out of a hat. Most of them are very much based on individual conversations, things that only the legislator really knows. There is a lot of movement right now towards centralizing decisions in people who are in line with folks in power at the moment, right? So that's why we've seen a lot of these proposals and policies moving away from centralizing decision-making in certain pieces, right? Things that don't really belong to that office are now responsible for that office, or they're not responsible for different decisions. One thing I will note is, out of all the ones that we've seen, I've been doing a kind of a dive into all the ones that are in this packet. It's a little early for most of these to figure out whether or not we need to be concerned. Many of them are not moving. We have over 1,000 bills filed. A fraction of those will become law at the end of the day. A fraction will even move into committee. So I just want to kind of reiterate the fact that all of these have to go through major processes. And one thing to note, just very simply, when you look at the bill digest and you scroll all the way down to see if it's in committee, if it has simply referred to rules and nothing else, rules is where bills go to die. Now, if you have any other steps between that, that means some thought has been given to that bill on mobility. So if you see many of the Democratic bills, pass first reading, refer to rules. Done. It will never move. If you see a bill that is pass first reading, refer to housing if favorable, J2 or J1 if favorable rules, that shows that there is some movement or there's some thought that it might move. So that's just a very simple, kind of off the top. That doesn't always mean they won't. They can always move things into committee. They can always just pick it up and move forward. But just simply looking at some of these gives you a little bit of a less of a anxiety when you're reading some of these bills. And also some of the things that we sometimes forget at the local level is that one person or 2 people or 3 people or maybe 10 people cannot get a legislation passed, right? So knowing who the sponsors are, knowing how much movement is behind it is also super important. Either way, all that to say, we're a little premature at the moment to be worried about our hair being on fire. It's getting a little warm, right?
At least.
But also, that's some of the tactics we've seen across the nation when it comes down to, this year altogether. And this is not just a new year, multiple years where you have a legislature who's seeking to gain power away from either the executive or locals. It's not new. It's not a new playbook. We've seen it coming. And also some of these bills are not the first time they've been filed. So all that to say, I'm glad we're taking the time to look at this, and I think it's important for us to know what's coming down the pipeline. But let's take a breath, see how some of things move, and be ready to jump if we have to. At the moment, I'm still sitting down.
I'll sit down with you. And so I want to thank Councilmember Posada for that. He is very connected to the North Carolina General Assembly and legislation because of the work he does in his day job, and we appreciate that coming from him. Councilmember Frey.
Thank you. Just a thought as we're looking at this, that some of the elements of this bill will have less impact on Carrboro than they will have on many other towns.
Right.
Like, there are a lot of, the interesting thing is that there are a lot of really good ideas sunk in the mess that is this set of bills, right? Ideas to promote affordable housing, particularly among them. There are some actually really lovely ideas in a few of these bills, mostly not the ones that have been pulled up on the screen today. And that's admirable, and it's not unheard of for states in pursuit of affordable housing to lean on municipalities that are not taking action. As an example, in Massachusetts, they have an act that requires every city and town served by the MBTA to have at least one zoning district where multifamily housing is allowed, because some of them don't. And they've been in court on that for a while. But like that's the kind of thing, like the state is leaning on municipalities to do the right thing, but they're also backing it up with state support and funding and help to make that a possibility. They're wanting to help towns work with the law and comply with the law. And so there are a lot of really, from my point of view, some great ideas in this batch of laws.
I did like the transit stop.
Right. The problem is that they are paired with some real poison pills, including some elements that are going to make it much more expensive for not just towns that maybe have squeezed too tightly on the regulation side, but also towns like Carrboro that are trying to do better with our ordinances. It's also going to make it more expensive for us to make improvements. It's going to make it harder for us to rewrite our land use ordinance to produce more housing. So I guess we'll just have to see how this unfolds and whether it's possible to get some of those poison pills out of the bill.
Thank you so much for that, Councilmember Frey. And also in this information, it does list May 8th as a crossover date, and it does say bills must have passed at least one chamber to make crossover, though experience has taught us that zombie bills that did make crossover can easily be filled with bill language that did not make crossover. So we have a ways to go, and certainly it continues to be a moving target. Are there any other questions for Tina? She's been standing there for a while graciously. Is there anything else for Tina?
Thank you for your work.
Thank you, Tina. We appreciate the presentation. Anything for Chad, who's online? Did we get everything we needed?
Just
from
thanks
both?
for being with us tonight.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Tina, and thank you, Chad. I appreciate it. Next item, Town Manager Tony.
Thank you. The next item is representatives from OWASA. They've been waiting patiently, and they're going to give an update and a potential request for assistance. Thank you.
Thank you, Manager Tony. Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. My name is Mary Tiger. I'm the Director of Community Relations for Orange Water and Sewer Authority, OWASA. Thank you for your time tonight. I'm going to talk a little bit about a concept for a water bill relief program with you tonight. Over the years, we've heard a lot of interest from local elected officials in a program that provides regular water bill assistance for low-income residents. So we wanted to spend some time with you this evening to talk through a concept that we're discussing with you all and other local governments in the region, and give some groundwork for a request for funding assistance to support this program. Although tonight we're not going to be asking for funding assistance. This is really just the groundwork and an opportunity for you to ask questions and provide feedback on the concept. In 2022, after extensive community engagement, the OWASA Board of Directors adopted a strategic plan with a priority to ensure equitable access to OWASA's life-critical services by increasing the adequacy and accessibility of customer assistance funding. We have made significant progress in updating the Care to Share program, which is essentially designed as an ad hoc hardship program that provides financial support when an OWASA customer falls on difficult times. This program is exclusively funded by donations from members in the community. And the basis of that is that there's some legal basis to that, is that OWASA in the purchase and sale agreement is prevented from providing free service There are also North Carolina state statutes that have been interpreted to mean that we cannot charge or credit customers based on their ability to pay. And so that's really why the Care to Share program is supported by donations. I'm happy to say that over the last 5 to 6 years, donations to Care to Share have significantly increased by about 5 times, in large part to promotional campaigns like the Dare to Share program that Mayor Fushi supported late last year. And I'm just going to take this opportunity for a shameless plug that if you want to sign up to donate now, there's a QR code where you can provide a one-time donation or sign up to donate on your monthly OWASA bill. So with this additional funding support, we have been able to increase the amount of funding that's provided by Care to Share. It is equivalent to about 2 months of the average household water bill, which is $250. We have increased the accessibility to Care to Share, where you can apply right through OWASA and don't have to go through a third party. And last year, Care to Share provided over $18,000 of bill assistance to 84 households that are served by OWASA. And there are other entities in our community that provide bill assistance as well. And last year, those entities, including the town of Carrboro's ARPA program, supported OWASA customers with over $8,000 of bill assistance. I do want to note that if we set the Wayback Machine and looked at 2022, 2023, and the amount of bill assistance that was provided in those years, primarily supported by the Low-Income Household Water Assistance Program, which was a federal program, as well as the ARPA funding, which the town of Carrboro supported, as well as the town of Chapel Hill, you would see orders of magnitude more of bill assistance that was provided. The LIWAT program provided over $300,000 of bill assistance over the 2 years, and the ARPA funding provided over $100,000 of bill assistance. So that just demonstrates some of the need. It's a bit of a proxy for the need for water bill assistance in our community. So looking a little bit more recently, despite having a Care to Share program and local social service agencies providing bill support, OWASA, 598 accounts were disconnected for non-payment last year. And of those, 167 were disconnected for non-payment 2 times or more. OWASA takes no great pleasure in disconnecting for non-payment. It's probably one of the worst things that we have to do. This policy is designed to help ensure that residents do not fall too far in arrearage, which is what we saw during COVID times when we were not doing disconnection for non-payment. We try to do everything we can to avoid the situation. We are now able to apply those Care to Share funds. We offer extended payment plans, and we take great efforts to communicate and coordinate with customers so they know when they're going to be subject to this. Currently, OWASA's water and sewer services for a household using the average amount of water, which is 4,000 gallons of water, that costs $115.55 for that water and sewer service. So someone earning minimum wage would have to work about 2 days pre-tax to afford that water and sewer bill. And we know that the pressure to increase rates to meet new regulations and invest in a resilient system will continue on into the future. Although we are early in our budget process for next year, our financial forecast for the coming 5 years is that water and sewer rates will increase between 42% and 49% cumulatively over the next 5 years. And staff is sharpening every pencil that we can to bring that down. We're turning over rocks for federal and state funding to support these projects that we need to invest in. And the OWASA Board of Directors is going to be handling some really tough decisions this budget year and future budget years with the affordability of our services front of mind. It is safe to assume that rates will need to increase at some fairly consistent basis over the coming years. So where where do we start with this assistance? Our services are not getting any more affordable, unfortunately, and the existing support is not covering it. There are a few directions that we could go in setting up a program. And so we've pulled together one concept so that collectively as a community we have something to respond to and something to wrap our arms around the cost and scope and scale. So we have started with a concept that utilizes an existing social service, and that is food and nutritional services, and agencies, primarily the Orange County Department of Social Services, to pre-qualify residents. This would minimize the administrative burden for those residents to receive assistance and get the help that they need. It is certainly not a comprehensive affordability strategy. We know that there's a lot of residents in our community that would not qualify for FNS, do not participate in FNS. So it's really kind of a tip of the iceberg strategy, but it's a start. And without a big pot of money coming in from the federal government or the state government to support any kind of water bill affordability project, we think that it's a pretty efficient and solid start. So this slide has some pretty specific numbers on it, but I don't want you to take any of them verbatim. It's really just kind of simply some arithmetic, again, for us to get our arms around what the scale and scope of this type of program would look like. Last summer, OWASA provided our customer records to Orange County Department of Social Services, who cross-referenced that with the households that were receiving FNS benefits last year. At the time, last summer, 249 OWASA customers were receiving FNS assistance. 20% of those had a Carrboro address. We also looked at how many of those households had someone in the household that was 55 years or older. So as a way to, we talk about the tip of the iceberg, the even finer tip of the iceberg, to give you some kind of idea about who is in those houses. So this table lays out how much it would cost to cover a portion of all of an average bill at 4,000 gallons per month for these households. So for example, the cost of covering 20% of the bill for all FNS recipients or 100% of the bill of the Carrboro residents that were receiving FNS benefits in 2024, it would cost a little over $69,000 a year. And again, while these numbers look very exact, it's just arithmetic. We don't know at this point what the enrollment in FNS would be and how many of those residents would opt into a bill assistance program. We have submitted a proposal to the Carrboro Department of Housing and Community Services for outside agency funding for the creation of a water bill relief program. We've submitted a similar proposal to the town of Chapel Hill, and we are in discussions with Orange County about the potential to redirect some existing utility bill assistance funding to support this program. So there's nothing settled. There's a lot of moving pieces at this point. The request that we put in to Carrboro and to Chapel Hill is for 6 months of funding support in fiscal year 26. And the reason for that is we think we would need about 6 months to stand up the program using the feedback that we receive at meetings like this tonight, as well as an understanding of what that funding support would look like. So again, there's no action items on this for you all tonight. It's more of a heads up and an opportunity to provide feedback and input on what this type of program would look like and answer any questions that you have. So I'll turn it over to Madam Mayor to facilitate that discussion. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Mary. Council members, are there any questions for Mary?
I have a question.
Councilmember Haven O'Donnell.
Yeah. Thank you for this report. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the effort that's being made. I guess my question is, because I'm not sure, when you refer to the folks who are eligible for the FNS in Orange County or even in Carrboro, are those folks the folks who are eligible for SNAP?
Yes, those are synonymous programs.
Okay, so who gets left behind?
So I mentioned that we provided the OWASA customer records to Orange County. So those are folks that have a direct contractual relationship with OWASA to purchase water. There are thousands of residents that are served by OWASA that live in multifamily units. And so they're paying for their water either as part of their rent or to a company that is sub-metering and rebilling. So if those households are receiving FNS benefits, they were not part of that 249 number. We also know that FNS is only available to legal residents, so those folks that don't have that status would be left out.
I would just add, it's not just only legal residents. It's someone who is a lawful permanent resident but is planning to apply for citizenship. If they have ever applied for any benefit whatsoever, that is a knock against them, and they are likely to not be granted citizenship. So we are locking people. And as a political matter, I just leave that on the table. But there's a public discourse about immigrants and what they may or may not be receiving from the government. But trust me, having had direct relationships with many immigrants, they are very, very aware that they may not sign up for any benefits if they ever want to have a hope of citizenship.
Yeah, thank you, Cristobal. That was exactly the direction I was going in. So this concept is being designed knowing that there's the most vulnerable people who would be vulnerable anyway, and in this political landscape are more than vulnerable, they sometimes disappear. And there needs to be a way to address that. Let's go back to the multi-family dwellings. So give me a scenario where someone who is in a multifamily dwelling who it's metered, it's a general metering. How does their individual billing work?
For someone that is individually metered by OWASA or a third party?
Well, if they're in, if they're in a multifamily dwelling, and so is it reflected in their rent? I mean, I want to know where the cost gets.
So for residents that live in multifamily units that are not individually metered by OWASA, there's a number of ways that they are paying for their water and sewer service. One is that it's included as part of their rent. It's not metered. The property manager is paying OWASA for the water and sewer services and collecting that theoretically through their rent. Another way, and it's increasingly common in our community, is that those individual units are sub-metered and rebilled for the service. And that is governed, those rates are governed by the North Carolina Utilities Commission. And there are rules around what they can charge. They basically have to pass through our rates, and they can charge us it's under $4 administrative fee per unit on top of that to cover their costs for running that program. And that applies to multifamily complexes that are 15 units or more. If you're sub-metering and rebilling a smaller complex, those are not regulated by the Utilities Commission, and that's a little bit of a hole in terms of regulation.
So would you say that most of the multifamily dwellings in Carrboro are, that the the cost of the water billing costs are mostly transferred into rent, or are they, or how many are individually metered?
It has been a couple years since I've done that analysis, so I cannot answer that question. I'd be happy to look into that for you more. What I can say is that the trend is towards sub-metering and rebilling. So most any new complex that is developed is sub-metered and rebuild. It's really kind of some of the older complexes that that don't have that.
And so let's just think about this, you know, what is it, 42 to 49% increase over the next 5 years. What does that look like in terms of impact to renters? And
typically how our rates are increased are across the board. So when we look at, say, a 5% rate increase, the monthly fixed charge that we apply for having a meter and having the service, that goes up by 5%, and our rates across the board go up by 5%. The OWASA Board of Directors does have an initiative to do a rate study, and that is something that's on the horizon where things might shift a little bit between different types of customer classes. So that's not typically on a regular year-to-year basis. That's not something that we typically adjust, but again, that is something that the Board of Directors is looking at in the near future as a rate study to consider that allocation.
yeah, I'd advocate for that rate study because I know that folks are mightily concerned about the tax, their local taxes, and when you add on to property tax, the OWASA bills, I think it's a question of cumulative impact for everyone. And yeah, I don't know how we can be more efficient at looking at where things need to be within the next 2-3 years, particularly because we do not know how many people are going to slide financially and economically in this region and in this county. And I think that's critical. And I don't know how you factor that in, and except if it's something that you look at how you can delay these costs just because of where we're at. I mean, I believe tonight is a county commissioners meeting, and I'm sure they're going to hear a tremendous amount. And I think, the people who are going up there are just beside themselves. So I would just ask for the OWASA staff and for the OWASA board to seriously read the pulse of the community and reach out to the community and get a good sense of what folks can handle at this time.
Thank you. And I should have mentioned that I am joined by OWASA Executive Director Todd Taylor, OWASA's Deputy Executive Director Stephen Winters, and Monica Dotson, and Elmira Mangum, OWASA Board of Directors, Carrboro appointed. So you have lots of messengers.
Hold on.
Did she have a question?
Councilmember Posada, and I'm not sure if Dr. Mangum wanted to come up to the microphone, potentially. Let's hear from Councilmember Posada, and then, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just love your last name. I just had to say that. Thanks for listening. Many of us have been asking for some kind of service forum for a couple of years. I think you've heard me say it like 4 times at this point. So thank you for taking that. I would be very curious to see kind of, looking at the increase that is projected, I would want to kind of see some round, like a little bit more of a round numbers of what we're expecting as far. And I know it's a little premature because there's this still in the works. So that's kind of, you asked for feedback. That's something that I would want to see when this comes before us, kind of projections, like overall, very concrete numbers of, numbers of support and kind of like different, to the extent possible, demographics of who would be impacted by this most. And I'm not specifically talking about race, but also kind of like socioeconomic status. You've already read some of that here. I think that's a really great piece. So when this comes back, I would want to see some of those kind of numbers. On top of that, I'm actually very curious because Councilmember Palmer brought up the public charge question, and I think it's a little early to kind of look at it, but it would be very interesting if in the process of creating this like kind of deeper, more hashed out program, someone can look into whether the public charge rule would impact this kind of service support program. My initial thoughts are no. Given that for the public charge rule to stick, there has to be strict federal ties, right? So that's part of how we've gotten away, Carrboro specifically, gotten away with supporting DACA recipients renewing their DACA because of the fact that it was through municipal funds and through nonprofit funds rather than a federal tie. Now, if there's federal money specifically attached to this program, that might trigger the public charge rule, not the entity receiving public federal funding, but the program receiving public funding. That's my reading of it. I'm not an attorney. So I would ask that somewhere, as this is kind of developed, there is a question about whether or not the public charge rule, which for everyone who might not know, this is a rule that is established in the federal government that any immigrant, documented or undocumented, receives any federal funding for any reason, for any support services, when applying for citizenship, may be denied should they receive any of those funds because they were quote unquote a burden on the public. So you mentioned the political sphere. We're not going to touch that, but nonetheless, one thing that I would really appreciate, along with some concrete numbers as this comes back, and kind of like that needs assessment and how this really rolls out, because that's something really good for us to then also go back and buy in, like have folks buy into it. That question of whether or not this would fall under the public charge rule, because at the same time that I want to support community members, I don't want to open the doors for anything to be detrimental in the future. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Posada. Is Dr. Mangum, is she coming up?
Good evening, everyone, and to say thank you for the appointment to the OWASA board. It is really an exciting venture. And I've learned a lot, but I do want to say to you, they had a bigger report for you tonight, but I asked them to hold off on it. So it's my fault if you don't get all the information you wanted tonight.
You know what?
But it's just a postponement. The reason for that is because there's so much going on. They are so involved in developing the safe drinking water for us and expanding the capacity for the drinking water according to EPA rules, that I thought it would be better if instead of a quarterly report, perhaps they can do a mid-year report, because I think some of the decisions that are involved and the weights and measures that they have to be taken will be better received when they make the final decisions about some of those things that's going on, rather than giving you a report about it in the middle of the decision process, because we're talking $500 million, 10 years out, which will affect the rates and all of that. And I think it'll be important for you to understand what goes into the quality of those decisions. And that team that they have is very focused on doing what's best for this community. But while they're in the process of making those decisions, I just suggested that they hold off till they are pretty sure, and also while they and until they get more solid financial projections that you can make some decisions about, or that the board will make decisions about. So I just wanted to say that because they're here, and it's my fault that they didn't give you an extensive report about the PFAS and P4, but they're doing a good job with it. They're all under. And I gave you, I think, the February reports that show you that they're doing a great job with the quality of the water that you get. So that's what I wanted to say. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mangum. Don't leave the microphone. And so I think you want to be reappointed as well. Is that correct?
If I must.
You heard it
I
first
enjoy-
here. You heard it first here.
I enjoy the service.
I thought so.
So if you do, fine. But I don't have the technical knowledge that deals with science behind it. I'm a community person.
Yes.
As you know.
That's okay. We appreciate that.
I'm not a
appreciate your
scientist.
service.
Okay.
All right. Thanks so much, Dr. Mangum. We appreciate that weigh-in. I don't know who this question is for. I might be behind on OWASA news. I try to read the summaries after the meetings. Is it 12% this year? Or are we not there yet? I know we talked about the rate study. We welcome Todd Taylor, Executive Director of OWASA. Thank you.
Glad to be here tonight. Always a joy to come around the corner here and talk to you all. Yeah, we're not there yet. I think that's part of what was behind Elmira's wanting to hold off a little bit, is that we're working through some budget scenarios right now. We've actually added a lot of meetings onto our calendar to wrestle with some of these problems, so we don't want to, I wouldn't want to give you a number right now because we're still working on it.
But you anticipate a rate increase this year or not? Or is that you're working through all that now?
We don't have a
number.
scenario with no rate increase. That's true. But we are looking at various rate increases, and we've got a lot of work ahead of us. But hopefully, June 30th, we'll have our budget approved, and I know the board and all of us will be working hard on it until then.
Okay. And so I think I did read that you're prioritizing the Clearwell. Is that correct, what I read there? But because of its unique function, right, with our water, can you speak to that? But there's still the PFAS treatment center on deck, but Clearwell will come first. Is that right, or?
Well, that's a decision still to be made by the
So it's
board.
not. Okay, that's under consideration.
Yes, that's under consideration, and I think the good news is in all of that, and what I would want to tell you all is for the past few months, you all have been drinking water that meets the standards that would be in place 4 years from now. So we've done a lot of work over the past several months optimizing our current treatment processes to be able to deliver that water to our customers way ahead of schedule. However, that's kind of a temporary solution that we've got right now, and we're working towards the long-term solution. But I think it's, that's the big message, and that's what allows us to maybe rethink how we do these projects, and maybe we don't have to do them both at the same time.
Okay.
But Madam Mayor, you are correct. We are. If we have to choose, it would be the Clearwell.
Clearwell.
The Clearwell is 80-some years old.
Right.
It's been in service for a long time. However, we have been inside our Clearwell, and we've done some investigations, and we found there's some structural problems with it, and we need to move quickly on that. Unfortunately, if something were to happen to that Clearwell, it is a major last step in our treatment process. It's where the actual disinfection of the water occurs. And if there were a catastrophic failure of that Clearwell, there's no water for the community. So it kind of puts it in perspective.
Don't say that. We've been there before.
I understand that was only for a day. This would be a lot longer than that. So that's why we are definitely, if we've got to pick between these two really big projects, that will be the one that we have to proceed with first. But like I said, We've done a lot of great work on making sure that the community's drinking water that is meeting the standards for PFAS, and we think we can carry that on for several years and allow us to maybe space these projects out.
And so, just to really be clear, I know that you're seeking additional funding, to help, offset some of these costs, but the majority of it is the users of the system.
Yeah,
That's
unfortunately.
just what, what it is.
Right. The money that is out there is woefully inadequate to address this problem, particularly in North Carolina, because we're uniquely impacted. So we may, some states may, that federal money and things that have been put aside, that might be sufficient for their water utilities. But in North Carolina, we've got a lot of affected water utilities. I think there's like 3.5 million residents of North Carolina that now their water doesn't meet that standard that will be in place in 2029. So that's a huge problem for our state. We are encouraged. There's some bills that are being floated around in the General Assembly right now that may provide some additional funding. We've applied through our senator and our representative here for some community project funding. And we're hoping, we're looking at any possible way that we can bring in outside funding into these projects. However, these are some huge projects, and it's going to take a lot of funds.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Mr. Taylor. Councilmember Frey, is it for Mr. Taylor
Yes,
or
it is.
Mary? Okay.
I think for Mr. Taylor. Mr. Taylor, I know you don't, as Dr. Mangan was saying, that you don't have a larger update on the PFAS project to bring us today. Is it all right if I have a couple of questions that have come in from the community?
Absolutely.
I wanted to understand, it was really interesting to read about the fact that you've managed to meet the standard with just this sort of temporary pilot project. I wanted to try to understand, as you move to the permanent project that would have its own building, sort of what benefits are you expecting to gain as you move from the pilot project into that? Is it that the medium for the carbon is more reusable, or is it cheaper, or what are the benefits of going through with the longer term project?
You're hitting on most of the things. What we're doing right now is we're using powder activated carbon. So it's still carbon, and the ultimate solution will be granular activated carbon. So they essentially do the same thing. They absorb the PFAS in the water is attracted to that carbon, and it attaches to the carbon. But in the powder activated carbon that we're using now, it's very sacrificial. So we're introducing the carbon in. PFAS gets attracted to it, it goes out the back side of the plant. It's very inefficient, can't reuse the carbon or anything like that. So it's actually going out in the waste stream from the plant. So therefore, all that PFAS is traveling along with that. And right now, that either ends up as compost or ends up in the landfill. That was one of the things that we had a goal going into this. Is there a better solution for that? And so granular activated carbon can actually be regenerated. You can send it off, and through thermal means, it can be regenerated and actually provide some PFAS destruction. So we want to try and interrupt that cycle of these forever chemicals just continually being in the environment if possible. So that's one of the key benefits of it. Again, I said it's sacrificial. We're putting a lot of money in this carbon, and then it's essentially just being thrown away. So in the granular activated carbon, while we're still going to have to invest in that media, when we do change it out, we can send it off and get it regenerated, bring it back. So it's more of those kinds of things are what we're looking at. Also, it's more effective. So there are concerns about, we're kind of at the maximum dosage that we can apply that powder activated carbon with our current plant operations. So if there were some spike in the levels, if we had to go completely to Cane Creek for some reason, let's say there's a drought or something in University, because right now we blend University Lake and Cane Creek together, and Cane Creek's the real problem with the PFAS. If there were some reason we had to switch to all Cane Creek water, we have some concerns about how well we could perform with that water over a long period of time. And then there's also different things that happen, just water chemistry, things that we're a little concerned about that we've got a very short window of data that we're extrapolating out, saying we can do this for years, but we don't know in the summertime. There could be an algal bloom. There could be something else that interferes with the carbon's effectiveness. So I think we can do it for a short term, but we wouldn't want to say that we want to do that for long term.
Thank you very much. Does that mean that in the future, if you have swapped over to granulated carbon, that you would expect the PFAS levels to drop even further, or is it that you would titrate it to keep it under the minimum standard?
We would set a goal that we would want to try and maintain, because we want to extend the life of that media as much as possible too. So we would have a goal that we're shooting for and we're trying to attain. It wouldn't necessarily be zero, and I don't know if that's even feasible to do that. Don't know if we could even measure that low. But we would try to make sure we had a comfortable margin between where our goal was set and where the limits are.
Thank you. And then the other thing that I'm hearing from community members has to do with the parking updates and land acquisition. We're sort of getting to a stage where I know you're looking at going to the Board of Adjustment. There's a lot of rumors swirling around, and I'm hoping I can help lay some of those to rest. One of the questions that I had was, can you help me understand, and feel free to say, like, this is going to be explained at the Board of Adjustment, or we don't know yet. Yeah, but how you're figuring out what your parking needs are for this, because as you're planning the Clearwell project, as you're planning the PFAS project.
Certainly, it's mainly now based on the displacement that's occurring on the site. These large facilities, one of them was contemplated, a new clear well. At some point we were going to need some extra clear well capacity. It was never contemplated for our site that we were going to need to essentially build a second filter gallery somewhere on site. And so it's displacing the majority of our parking that we have available to build these large facilities there. So it's essentially trying to replace the parking that we have now with new parking. And as you all know, we have a large fleet of vehicles that we need to find places to park, and we need to keep them here, because if there's an emergency in the middle of the night, we don't need to have to go 10 miles to try and go get the truck to go and fix the water line. And obviously we're a very labor intensive operation, so we have a lot of employees and they work a lot of different hours and things like that. So sometimes, we have a significant need for parking on site. But essentially right now it's mainly the displacement, and then kind of looking at your all's ordinances and requirements for what minimum parking we need on the site.
Thank you. Are you subject, in addition to the town of Carrboro, are you subject to any regulations that stipulate amount of parking that you need to have?
I'm not aware of it, other than that we have that, we have a certain need, and we need to accommodate growth in the future. We do anticipate that our fleet will grow, our number of employees will grow going on into the future, and we're very limited on our site right now, so we're looking at trying to find contiguous property to that site and expand as much as we can just on our own footprint there.
Okay. And do you have any ongoing conversations with town staff around parking sharing or other, sort of different solutions for meeting your parking needs?
We've had a lot of conversations with the town staff through this whole process, and they've been very helpful to us, of pointing us in the direction of what properties that would be ideal for parking and for some of those kinds of things. So yes, we've been looking at that, and we've been looking at some out-of-the-box type thinking on parking spaces. I think bigger problem again is fleet, and where do you stage all of that equipment and those kinds of things like that. And then also Like when we have big projects like this, you need somewhere on site for the contractor to store materials and things like that. With these larger facilities, that is quickly evaporating around our site, and it's very expensive if you have to have them store materials off-site and then bring things to the site every single day for construction. So those are a lot of things that are kind of factoring into our thinking on these.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that extra context.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Mr. Taylor? Or Mary Tiger? Or Dr. Mangum? Or any other OWASA employee this year?
Thank you all.
Yeah, we thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. And I think all we had to do was receive that information, and we have done that. Town manager, we'll wait for them to, thank you so much.
I'll grab some water. Anybody want any?
2 minutes, town manager.
Two.
Check, Simon, are we ready to continue? Okay.
All right. So, welcome back. We're gone for a few minutes. Town Manager Tony, last item.
The last final item for the evening is a discussion of advisory boards and commissions membership process.
And I can kick it off.
Thank you.
So on March the 18th, the council received a streamlined process to appoint and reappoint members of advisory boards. We had done a consolidation not too long ago, and everybody was ready to get on board with getting their advisory boards staffed so they can meet quorum. On April the 1st was the first opportunity to reappoint and appoint members that council received that streamlined process. There were some questions and some concerns with that process, and just wanted to give the council an opportunity to have a discussion on those items. There are a few items or a few topics on that item, and I will either go through them as we get to them, or I can give all of those at now, and we can just discuss. So, the first topic was to consider the streamlined process and see if there was any integration from the older process that was being utilized for the appointment and reappointment of advisory boards. Second was how council will discuss appointments and reappointments. Next was to maintain a paper ballot versus voting using voice votes. And the next item was to provide all applications, including board chair recommendation and other supporting documents to council for consideration of appointments and reappointments. And the last item was to consider if current members requesting reappointment will need to submit a new application. So I can turn it over to council, and where I need to jump in, or if you have some questions from me, I'll be glad to answer.
Thank you so much, Mr. Joyner. Council members, these are the items that I remembered from our last conversation when we moved forward with that first series of appointments. And I wanted to circle back so that we wouldn't have to have this discussion again in the midst of future appointments, which are probably some coming up before we get out of session in June. And so it would bring clarity for us and also for Mr. Joyner. So we were presented with a streamlined process by Mr. Joyner for comparison and possible integration into our current process. So I wanted to just kind of hear from council members about that streamlined process. I think I heard that we did like that applicants' information was not necessarily publicized. And that in general, we did like what Mr. Joyner put forth with the streamlined process. So if everyone is okay with that, fine. If there are questions about that, about how it's going to work still, this is a good time to talk about it or to kind of get your questions out. Councilmember Haven O'Donnell.
Yeah, both Eleazar and I had asked that council members receive all of the information. Is that still?
Yeah, that's one of the items. You mean the applications
Yes.
and supporting documents?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and tie that because it says here, bullet number 4, provide all applications, including board chair recommendations and other supporting documents to council for considerations of appointments and reappointments. Council members are fine with that, I presume. We do need that information to make informed decisions, so we can cross that one.
Right.
Streamlined process, are we,
So.
it's been presented, did you want to
Yeah,
talk more about
so
that?
I want to be real clear. So what's in the streamlining? The council will get the materials, in terms of whose names are put forth, I believe what was recommended was the chair and staff
Chair and staff, what are you?
in terms of making recommendations to council.
So yes, the chair and the staff can make recommendations. The recommendations does not have to be accepted. It's just a recommendation.
right.
The council can choose to do what they think is best for that particular advisory board.
Right.
The list of, if there are multiple applicants, and let's say there are 6 applicants and 3 of those are recommended, all the applicants would be listed. You would get all of the applicants' information regardless of if they're recommended or not. You will be able to see that information. I will also provide that recommendation of those individuals that are recommended. So you will see the applications for everyone on appointments. I think a discussion for reappointment can be had. I think that was part of another question, but for all of the appointments, you will receive all the applications, all the recommendations. That will be in a packet that is sent to you prior to the actual meeting. That will not be items or documents that are in the meeting packet.
Oh, like you did before.
Correct. It will be the same process that I did prior to the April 1st appointment and reappointment of advisory board members.
So, just in terms of any listening audience, streamline means what? What frills were cut away? What kinds of things make it different?
So I think, well, and you can correct me if I'm not on the same page as you, but I think previously all that information was provided in the packet, whether it was addresses, applications. Not sure if recommendations were provided. I don't know how that was handled, but I do know all of that was handled, and that information was all part of the packet. What you received the last time was not all on the process in the packet. I gave you different information that was listed on the actual agenda. On the agenda, there were just the list of the advisory boards with the applicants that had applied.
Okay, and so, and I appreciate that the information is not publicized, all that personal information. In terms of folks who are interested in applying, what can they expect from their point of view so that folks in the community understand? I understand from our point of view, in terms of the material, what can folks in the community expect if they put in an application at this point?
The process is still the same. On their end, they will see no different than what they have been expected to do, and that is to fill out an application.
Okay.
Now, reappointment, once again, that is to be determined, but they will see no difference in how they are applying at this point.
Okay.
Was that your, or you had some?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I think I'm good.
So I wanted to make sure we got to how council will discuss appointments, reappointments. So I heard from several of you, we all did during the meeting, and we need to get clear about that. I see Councilmember Posada and Palmer? No, just Posada and Frey, and Haven O'Donnell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So that was kind of the point that I wanted to get to, right? So, but before I go into that, I did want to mention that I'm also in favor of having anyone that wants to be reappointed, just like the option that I believe Councilmember Palmer, if not Merrill, brought in last time. of just giving them the options of, if you want to get reappointed, here's your previous application, instead of having to fill out a whole brand new one. So I'm kind of in favor of that piece, but yeah, I think that's the last one on the list. But when we were talking about kind of appointments and discussions here about council, in my experience, that this would be a new thing for us because we haven't, at least since I've been on here. Again, my tenure is not as long as some other folks on this dais. But I do want to make sure that we are having discussions, maybe in a way that it doesn't name or doesn't put folks kind of on target in any way, shape, or form, but it does talk about the qualifications we're looking for in applicants, right? So I wouldn't say, I want to talk about, candidate A. I didn't like that candidate A did this and this and this and this, rather than I'm looking for the candidates that I'm supporting that met these criteria, because this is what the kind of like when I'm looking at what I would want to present to council. I do think it's important for community to hear us kind of voice what those are, rather than just simply receiving the recommendations, which I think are really great, and getting the additional information around why the chair decided that these are the recommendations, or the staff members, this is what stood out for them. But also, like we did before, it was there was not much transparency there. Right, when I came on board, there was also not a lot of conversation around how do I pick some of these people, and sometimes when I voted for folks that were being reappointed, I read the application, and then if there wasn't any major difference, I would go with the person that I knew, which is not. I don't think that's the correct way to govern, but at the same time, I was like, I don't have it. No one else wanted to talk about these, so I'm just like, all right, here's a thing, here's a vote, and I'm like stuck with what I know, and what I know is these applications look almost the same, but I know candidate A instead of candidate B. I don't want us to be in that position. That's also not transparent towards community. So when we're thinking about having these discussions, I want to keep it towards what we're looking for in candidates. Why listen to the advice of folks who are in this, specifically the chairs, right? These are the folks that are sometimes the most dedicated in that committee, and sometimes they become council members. So that's what and I think that's one thing that I might have not just voiced well last time we were having this kind of discussion. I want to talk about what we're asking folks to do, why we're selecting the people we're selecting, not have a brawl over candidate A or B or C or D.
That's right.
Does that make any sense? But anyway, thank you, Madam Mayor.
That was the point I was.
Thank you,
And
Councilmember.
Can I just add something that may make a difference or may not make a difference? All of these advisory boards also have council liaisons on them. So I think it's important that the decision is made or the conversation is had with council liaisons, staff liaisons, and board chairs on sort of what is needed for these particular boards. And if these applicants share the same, I guess, goal as the board. So I think it can kind of be a collaborative effort versus it just being, the chair or the liaison making that decision. So I would think that would be an involvement that council liaisons would be a part of as well.
So I wanted to start by yes-anding what Councilmember Posada said. I think that described really well the kind of conversations that we want to have, where we're being transparent before the community, and we're also being respectful of folks who are putting their names up. So I think that has a lot to do with our rules of procedure and our decorum as a board, that we are discussing appointments openly and also kindly, respectfully. And then, so given that assumption, if we have a consensus on that as a council, I think that it does not particularly matter which method of voting we use, because what's important is the content of the discussion. My understanding from the research that I've done is that a voice vote is considered standard practice for this kind of thing very broadly. Our prior use of paper ballot is a little bit idiosyncratic. There's nothing wrong with that, but I don't see that it gives us any additional benefit. The benefit is to be had in the quality of the discussion that we have about the applicants and not about the method of voting, in my view. In addition to that, I did want to add that I also agree with what Councilmember Posada said about assuming that we're able to, because I've been through the application web form, and so I know that the town clerk and others have access to a prior application, but that doesn't mean that they can resubmit it easily, if you follow me, that like you have access to that data. So you could say to someone applying for reappointment, do you have any changes that you would want to make to your previous application? Here's a copy of it. But if they have changes they want to make, I think at that point, probably what the clerk would need to do is then send them, if they said, yes, I do have changes, they would need to then go in and fill the application out again in order to make changes, because it's not like they can call up in the software. They can't call up the old, it's like they can't reload it to be submitted again. They can pull the document, but it's just a flat file. Think of it as being a Google form. You can't, hey, I want to fill out that Google form again, but with all my stuff from last time pre-populated. Just a technical constraint there that I wanted to call it. But I am in favor of, both in favor of requiring folks for reappointment to present an application, and for making it a little easier by just offering the, saying, do you have anything you want to change? You don't have to re-enter the whole thing if you have nothing new that you would add to your prior application. My last question here, I think this is a question for you, Mr. Joyner, about the processes that you have in mind for ensuring that applicants have a good experience. You were talking about that the process from their point of view would not change. One thing I wanted to ask about there is, do we have a clear plan for how to communicate back to applicants about the status of their applications? Meaning, like, we've received it, how often should you expect to get updates? What should you expect to hear and when, as you go from submitting an application to, because there may be some delay between submitting the application and being considered for appointment by the council?
I think that can be work in progress. I don't have a clear process to that. When I think they get confirmation when they finish filling out an application that is completed and it's received. We do send out correspondence after an applicant has been appointed. Sometimes we don't send out, because we still hold on to those applications in cases where we may need another pool of applicants. So a lot of cases, we don't say that, hey, we no longer are still wanting to fill positions. So there is not a clear process, so that is work in progress, I would say.
Okay, thank you. Madam Mayor, I'd like to ask that we add to the direction that we give to staff tonight, that a specific process be developed that ensures that applicants will receive communications at some regular interval, right? I'm not too picky about exactly what that is.
About application
About their
status.
application status. So so for instance, that if they're, that they understand, like, yes, your application is in a pool that is going to council, and we will let you know when that's scheduled for council, something like that.
Fair.
Or if there is a delay, or if they've gone back in the pool to be considered for some future round, that they know that. There are some gaps, because as the town clerk suggested, right now there is no specific process for that, and that's led to some pretty sizable gaps for applicants. And I think that actually predates the pandemic, in my experience, that there have been sometimes long gaps where applicants knew that their applications had been received, but had no idea what was coming next.
Mr. Joyner, did you talk to us about some software? Is there a software that, or, okay.
Yeah,
know what
I
that
did.
mean.
It will be very helpful because some of those tasks could be something that could be automated with software.
Okay.
So, but currently that software has not been, we've decided on that software. It is something that will be acquired in fiscal year 2026.
Okay.
Yeah, generally, I'm very hesitant to add something else to the clerk's plate, but this is one of those areas where there is a gap that's sufficiently serious that's impacting things that I feel like I would say, you know, I'm willing to add that to the plate and say, we need to figure it out, even if that is, you know, a future deputy clerk has an outreach list to go through once a month, even if that's manual work.
That's what
I think
was
it needs to
thinking, too.
happen.
You know, that responsibility could go to your new deputy. But yeah, I think that I do agree with that. The status of applications is important. Transparency, communicating about any delays or hiccups in the process. So yeah, I'm in agreement with that, and I have no problem adding that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's all for me.
Thank you. I think Councilmember Haven O'Donnell and Councilmember Palmer.
Yeah, yeah, thank you for bringing this back. Let's see, would you put up on the screen the 5 bullets so that I don't have to keep going back and forth? That'd be great.
Let me see if I can.
Should be on the.
I know, but I'm having to flip back.
Oh,
and
you're
forth,
flipping.
yeah.
Okay. Here you go. I'm just gonna erase that until he finds
Yeah, so, yeah, I think we sound like we're in agreement and comfortable with the streamlined process. And in terms of discussing appointments and reappointments, I think we all feel that the quality of the discussion is key. I think really what we're saying is that we're going to be talking about the qualifications of applicants and really looking at supportive comments. We're really not going to be talking about folks that we don't support. Am I right? Okay. And within that we have done that in the past. We have absolutely done that. I'm going to give you an example, and it's when I advocated very strongly for someone who's very new to the Carrboro community because of annexation, and that was Lydia LaBelle.
When she was alderman.
And everybody else wanted, oh, this is planning board.
I wasn't for the plan, before
Yes.
she became an alderman.
And everybody, that's right, and everybody else, you know, wasn't particularly interested. So I was saying this because I think it's really important to give supportive statements and not be necessarily looking to, and talking about why they're qualified. So I'm absolutely on board if that's the nature of the discussion as it will go. I do have concern that back in September, we had a community person who was concerned about one of the candidates. And my what-if question is, what if we are all in supportive of, and making supportive statements, but folks in community have concern? And because that was never addressed. We never had that problem before. It came up this last September, and I'm just putting it out there because it's something that makes a difference. If someone in community has viable concerns, you know, what do we do? So I'm just going to say that that occurred. It never occurred I had ever seen before, and I'd like us to at least know, you know, what do we do if there's a concern brought to us? And it would probably be brought to us before, you know, we're actually sitting at the dais, but I think we need to consider that. Qualifications. Everyone, you know, looking over the list of wards, one of the things that we need to realize, and this is very important because I've been on lots of different boards, the word qualifications is not specific. For the climate action team, it may be, environmental experience or whatever. Science background. You heard Elmira speak tonight. Elmira is an incredible representative because of her experience and her involvement with community. And it doesn't matter that she's not a scientist. And yet, she herself said, we've got one more seat to fill. She's looking for somebody with science. But if you look at Race Equity Commission, that's lived experience. If you look at climate, it's so, I want us to be thinking about what qualifications mean. We also have an equity goal. So, I'm saying this because I don't think the discussions are as simple as yays and nays. I think the devil is in the details with qualifications. And I want us to be more clear about how that's going to play out. So I'm just raising that question. Not that I disagree, but I think, as I said, the quality of the discussion is going to come from how we look at the qualifications for each one of these boards. That's always different for each one. Do you want to say something before I go?
We're going to go to Palmer.
Okay.
You finish up and go to Palmer.
So, voice vote. I definitely feel like voice vote is fine in some situations, but in this situation where you have folks in the community, if you give a voice vote and then you, the person that you voted for is not chosen, or you didn't choose the person that you are the liaison to, that is awkward. That is really awkward. It's awkward for you. It's awkward for the person. To me, I said this before, as a way of ensuring, just like we want to ensure the public information, we want to ensure that we always maintain the neutrality when we're going to be involved with boards. And that's the other reason why liaisons should not be involved in the recommendation process, because liaisons have, particular involvement and engagement in the community that may or may not serve to be neutral in a recommendation. That's really important. We've had people who were blocked from being on advisory boards, many people, and it was wrong, and it will continue to happen if folks who have a viable stake in the outcomes of decisions that are made by advisory boards have that kind of weight in putting names forward. If you're sitting on council, you already have the weight to give it more weight and filter the names coming through. I just feel is problematic. I think this is something council needs to face, that our advisory boards have had a consistent problem with being weighted heavily towards community members who are downtown-centric. And I'm going to say it because there are folks in the community who have said to me, I'll never get on an advisory board because I live out in Lake Hogan Farms, or I live in Wexford, or wherever. But there is a definite sense in the community that the way you get on a board is if you're living downtown. And I'm going to put it out there because you need to know that that's what's said, and we own that as a council. And that's yet another reason why I I don't think council members should at least put the names forth in a
Councilmember,
recommendation. Thank you.
thank you, Councilmember Haven O'Donnell. Councilmember Palmer.
So this is a question to my colleagues, and that is essentially, given my newness to my role as a liaison, and I understand that to be as an observer, and I can certainly answer questions if questions are asked to me directly, but also my experience has been in my limited number of meetings that folks are eager to have, these are public meetings, and they're eager to have more people come and see what they do. And I have been asked directly more than once to try to recruit through my network people to come to increase the pool of possible people, because I have had it happen that a meeting that was on my calendar was canceled for not being able to make quorum. And so my question to you is, like, my default expectation would be that I should leverage my network to generate names of people to come forward and push them at, like, and this is this politics civics distinction, that this is putting on the civics hat, that we are serving our community, and here's a relatively light way that you can also serve your community, and that I use my position for that. And having done that, then my responsibility to this board is to say, this name that you see on the sheet, fulano de tal, I know him, and he is on this sheet because I egged him on to show up to this meeting, and he showed up not once but twice and showed commitment, not even having been assigned to the board, and showed enthusiasm for the work. So that is why I'm enthusiastic. So just as an example of my expectation would be that I would say that I would disclose that to you, rather than just stay silent and hide that fact that this is someone through my network. And I just would appreciate your response on how does that sit with you, as is that in line with your expectations about how this should work?
So I see Councilmember Posada, and I want to respond to that question, because we're constantly in search of diversity, on our advisory boards and commissions. And so when it shows up, we want to, our goal is to be responsive to it. So I think we would want to know that. I mean, I feel like I would. And I see some heads nodding, and so that would be my response to that. And I feel like other council members potentially would feel the same. Councilmember Posada and then Frey.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I think before I go into some of the other things I had, I would want to respond to you, Councilmember Palmer. I think part of the way that I see my job as a council member when it comes to appointments is to use my network to get people in and try to do that, because as the mayor said, we're always looking for diversity. So I will say that I don't look to be neutral in decisions of who we appoint. I'm just going to be honest. That's the way I look at it. I'm going to be looking towards the goals of, the town, and that already comes in with some bias towards it, period, right? So I will always say that my role here is that, and we all serve in different ways, right? So the way that I serve may not be the same as other people on this dais, not maybe other people in other communities. That's totally fine, the way that I'm looking at it. And also, I would also disclose anyone who I wanted to recruit, because of the fact that I want folks to know this is someone that I thought was important to bring on here because of XYZ. Specifically, if there's something that I think that person brings to that board that is needed, right? That may not always be reflected in the application. So hope that helps. I think that would be a great piece. And if you already have someone who's attended 2 meetings, please let us know. One of the other things I had kind of on similar lines, right? Kind of thinking through discussions with among us around the applicants, and one of the things comes to mind, and Councilmember Haven, thank you for bringing this up, the qualifications piece, I think this is why I was talking about, I want all of us to have a conversation about what we are what qualifications for me look different than that of the mayors and that of Councilmember Haven O'Donnell. And I don't want there to be a specific list of like, in order to qualify for this committee, you have to do this, this, and this, because it's also very exclusionary, right? And one of the things that I hear, and I recognize that all of us hear different things from different sectors of the community. So none of us speak for the entire community on what things we're hearing. And one thing that one of us hears may not be what everyone else does. One of the things I hear about when people are looking at committees is whether or not they are qualified, quote unquote, to be on that committee, right? And the only qualification that is listed is being a member of the town, right? A resident. And where it's affordable housing, whether it's Board of Adjustment or the Planning Board, you know, one of the things that I will always look at is for that diversity and that commitment to the community, and not a degree, right? But that's and that's a key piece of these qualifications that I want us to talk about and be honest about when we're having these conversations, so that we are all kind of like in the same kind of arena of recognizing that we're all individual electeds. We all serve in our own capacities in different ways. And what I see as a qualification may not be specifically for someone else, but maybe me naming it might bring and might, you know, turn on a light for someone else and might change the perspective. Or it may not, and that's totally fine. And then also wanted to address the kind of the voice ballot versus the secret ballot, paper ballot.
Because it's not a secret.
It's not a secret. It's not a secret, right? Paper ballots, because what we've done before is we've still done a voice vote. It's just everyone fills out their thing, and then the clerk would say, candidate 1, 5, 7, and 3 receive the most votes, and then we vote for candidate 1, 5, 7, and 3, right? So the difference is we would all be in agreement of what those candidates are before we do a voice vote, but we would have that, do it as a discussion rather than as a writing down, right? Is that would be the key difference without having the paper ballots? I'm more in line with that. Again, I want to have more transparency. I recognize that it might bring in some awkwardness, but I also think that's part of our job. As
Transparent. Let's be clear.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Haven O'Donnell, I respected your time. Please do the same. But again, so that's where I'm coming at for this. Being in this seat also requires us to make tough decisions and requires us to sometimes make decisions that will make us uncomfortable out of this office, out of this building. And that I see as part of our duty. And I think in the effort, in the goal of transparency, the way I see it is I want to have that discussion out respectfully in the open. I yield back.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Posada. Councilmember Frey, and I think nobody else.
I'm speaking here just to answer Councilmember Palmer's question from my experience, which is it's critical for council members to work on recruiting for advisory boards, not just the ones where they are the liaisons, but in general, because it's actually a very small pool of people who are able to give focus to that. And that's the board members, the board chairs, the town through the communications group, and us. And then the sort of loose network of generally interested residents, but the only folks who have it as a charge are the advisory board members and us. So I think it's really important that we do recruit people. And I agree completely that we're each going to have our own criteria, and each board has different criteria that are relevant. I do want to call out that there is one advisory board where there actually is a set of important qualifications, and that is the Board of Adjustment.
Makes sense.
That for that one, while of course diversity of representation in the town is important, it is also critically important that certain skills be present on that board at all times and well represented. Because if you get below a certain critical, basically if you get below a certain critical number of lawyers on that board, it starts to go sideways in a way that has negative implications for development decisions, legal liability for the town, that kind of thing. That said, I think, I don't, to my knowledge, council members have not in the past had a role in the recommendations that are made by the board chairs. And in fact, typically, the staff liaisons have also not had a role in that, that it was up to the board chairs alone. And so I have no issue with if the staff liaisons have some reason to provide a recommendation that doesn't align with the board chairs, that's fine, that's fodder for our discussion. I don't, generally speaking, think that the council liaisons should put forth a recommendation, because we're also doing the recruiting, we're also taking the vote. We've already got our thumb appropriately on that scale. There's no need to replicate that effect. But it's absolutely appropriate to recruit people for a wide variety of reasons, whether you're recruiting to try to fill a skills gap on the board, whether you're trying to recruit to, for instance, get a resident of Wexford onto the planning board because you want that neighborhood to have a voice in planning. Like, those are all valid reasons to recruit somebody. And just generally speaking, I think we all have a goal that I'd love to see, if any, one of the reasons that we've talked in the past about figuring out how we know what boards have vacancies in a timely fashion is because I think it's incumbent on all of us to recruit, especially when we have a board that's coming up short, because it's so important that they be able to make quorum and do their business. I did also want to just to lift up something that you said, which is that in your experience, the liaisons, the council liaisons are listeners unless directly addressed. I think that's really important. We have in the past had problems with council liaisons driving discussion or leading the discussion of the boards, and it's really important that we are letting the boards do their work and not driving that discussion. I think generally speaking, if the board chair or a member of the board didn't ask the liaison a question, we should probably be keeping mum as a general rule.
Councilmember Price had a mouthful there. So I'm going to go back to the paper and the voice votes. We need to give very clear direction to Mr. Joyner tonight. I feel like we're in alignment pretty much with everything else. I certainly think this council is capable of having appropriate discussions about candidates. So I'm not as concerned about that. So paper ballot, voice vote, up or down vote? Or am I getting a consensus one way or the other?
Is this based on consensus, or do we need a motion and a vote from the council?
I think this is kind of, let's see, consider and provide direction. I feel like this is a little less formal, Nick, but Mr. Joyner, Nick or Mr. Joyner, whomever, we'll do whatever.
So it is the will of the council, but I will say the other items were done basically on consensus. So I would say it.
Keep it kind of informal.
I would, but that would be totally up to council. It wouldn't be wrong either way you went, to be honest with you.
Great.
Madam Mayor, it sounds to me like we're all on the same page about reapplications for reappointment. It sounds like we're all on the same page about receiving the extra documents. I believe we are on the same page about the ask to the clerk to develop a process for ensuring communication back to applicants. We're all in favor of the streamlined process that I heard. I think, and it sounded like we have a great consensus on our standard of decorum and appropriateness for conversation. I think the only item where we may not be unanimous is on the question of the paper ballot versus a voice vote.
Voice vote, correct.
And liaison engagement and recommendations.
That's right.
Oh, good point. Was there anyone who thought that the council liaisons should be involved in making recommendations?
Well, and by the way, that was on Clerk Joyner speaking that, and by all means, I see that we X that out, so I'm okay with that. So that is not even an issue now. So we can move past that particular
Was the
item.
voice vote or paper ballot?
I believe that's the only item with any controversy.
I think everybody else is aligning except for that one, Mr. Joyner. And where are we, council?
Well, obviously, I support a paper ballot,
Paper
just because
ballot?
I think that
Councilmember Haven O'Donnell.
that's important to not only the potential appointees, but also the, the relationship with the liaisons and other folks in the community. I just think it's important.
Thank you. Other council members? Posada?
For similar reasons, I would want a voice vote.
Craig?
I don't think it makes an enormous difference, but I prefer the voice vote approach.
Thank you. Palmer?
I don't feel that I have enough experience to.
Palmer?
I hear you. Well, where I was going with this is that I think the risks with the paper ballot are replacing process, replacing a need for consensus building with process, replacing a need for active face saving by us with process, and so I think that the risk with the voice vote is that we could then get bound up if we are unable to come to consensus and end up punting, and I don't want that to happen. If we can do it as a voice vote, then I'm in favor of it, and I would just want some sort of check-in if this is causing a problem where we are punting and not able to deliver on filling out our advisory boards.
Paper ballot?
So I would say we could come back to paper if we see that voice vote
Voice
is a
vote?
problem. Voice vote. I'm coming down on voice vote. Thank you for pushing me. I appreciate it.
Will.
Okay, thank you, Palmer. Councilmember Palmer, I'm sorry. I apologize. I know how it is when you're new and, I get it, all right? But we got to land on one side or the other this time. Councilmember Merrill.
I'm fairly indifferent, but I would actually give a slight nod to the paper ballot.
Okay, so I have 2 for the paper ballot. And for me, I feel like since we are having an open discussion about the candidates for advisory boards, I am fine with the voice vote. But, we have not tried any of this. We don't know what the discussion is going to be like. I'm going back to what Councilmember Palmer said. We don't know what we don't know because we've not tried it as of yet. And so I think we will lean heavily into our first experience and see how it feels to everyone. But it sounds like 1, 2, 3, 4 voice votes and 2 for the paper ballot.
I got it.
And I think we've covered everything, colleagues. We've covered everything. I think I have one matter by the board that I know about from Councilmember Haven O'Donnell.
Yeah, I have
Something she wanted to, did you have something as
No.
well? Okay.
That it? Okay, so Thursday, I'm going to, with a group of folks, to the Cary Water Treatment Plant to look at the Invicta pilot project. And there are at least a half dozen of us going. Elmira is one of the folks who is going as well. And I want to know from council, how would you like me to memorialize the visit and report?
I think we've all seen emails. Councilmember Haven O'Donnell has sent a couple of emails about the upcoming visit, and this has to do with the PFAS method, correct?
Correct.
In comparison to what OWASA
Back.
has already selected, and you're looking at an alternative.
Yeah.
And you want to come back and bring some type of report. I think it probably is appropriate to send that report via email. is what I'm thinking. I don't imagine it coming another way.
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea. I don't want to assume that I'm going to be, particularly impressed, but I am impressed that Carrie's piloting this model, and I want to really get a good feel for why. It does not have the leftover material that the GAC has, or the powdered carbon. And so I want to be able to ask more specific questions. I read the Indy article, however.
Which you shared with us.
Which I
right?
shared with you all, because I thought part of it was interesting, but then there were certain questions I would have asked that were not asked, or there were other questions that were not enough specificity was given. So I'm hoping to get more information about it. And if nothing else, I hope it informs us well enough that we can ask OWASA, to give us some rationale for why they would not be exploring further.
And they've
that's
landed solidly on the
GAC.
The GAC.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Okay. So I appreciate you doing that. We'll look for you to send us some type of report about what your visit is. Include Town Manager Tony and the clerk for recording, and Councilmember Posada.
Yes, on this, and thank you, Councilmember Haven O'Donnell, for bringing this. I think one of the things that I would be really interested in is in that report, in that email that you sent out, the questions you're going in there with and any answers you might receive, that's going to be helpful, at least for me. Again, this is one of those areas that I think we've talked about that I'm not super familiar with. This is not my, kind of like my cup of tea, whatever the thing is. So it's late, y'all.
Maybe he doesn't know much about it. That's
Anyway.
Beverage will need water.
Yeah. So any questions that you have as you go in there, any things you answer, and if you're any surprised by anything else, that would be great. If you're asking what should be in that report, I think that's would be useful to me. And then, Madam Mayor, if appropriate, I would like to bring another matter once we're done with this one.
And I just say, I had not received, Elmira gave us some information on the PFAS and the, from OWASA, so I'm going to have to read through this material first.
I think I have Councilmember Frey. Is it Palmer next, and back to you?
Madam Mayor, very briefly, just to give y'all an early heads up that I will be out of the state on May 20th, which is a day that we have a meeting. As of right now, it appears that I will be able to attend remotely, but I wanted to let you know early about that.
And that is fine, and we'll work with you on that. Councilmember Palmer.
And just thank you again for going in there with this, and just to Councilmember Posada's point, I would be interested in the world that I work in my day job. There's a lot of stuff that we don't consider because we don't meet the scale, or that we do consider that other folks might consider because we do meet the scale. So that sort of entry point, I'm just very mindful that Cary is larger, but I don't know for their water system. Is there a threshold point? Is my question that I would ask you to go in with.
Well, and one of the things, and I'll tell you, this is one of the reasons I want to make a visit, is that the pilot project is at Jordan Lake, because Jordan has, as you know, a significant amount of PFAS. Well, back in 2014, 2015, Sammy Slade and I met with the OWASA folks, and we went round and round and round about the fact that the town of Carrboro, in an emergency, receives water from Durham. And where do you think Durham gets the water? Jordan.
Yep. It's been a kicker for a while.
It's been, right. So that's the reason why, I feel like we need to get the information.
Is that it, Councilmember Palmer? Thank you. Councilmember Posada.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is this is a separate issue that I just want to bring to the council, and that is just, and to the staff, and it's just to apologize for having to miss last week at very short notice. I had a full intention of being back in my hotel room in order to take this meeting. A couple of the meetings with representatives and senators went a little long and got delayed, and I unfortunately wasn't able to get back into my hotel in time. So, I know that there was some effort done on the part of the staff as well as council members to accommodate for that. And I usually try to not call out of anything, and specifically not something as important as a council. But I did want to make sure that I publicly not only thank the staff for the work you did to set that up, but also apologize to my colleagues and the staff for that very short notice of missing the council. And again, thank you all for understanding.
You were excused appropriately, but thank you so much, Councilmember Posada. And so we do not have another council meeting until May the 6th. And that'll be a regular business meeting. I will entertain a motion.
So move. Oh, sorry. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded, Madam Mayor.
It's been moved and properly seconded that we adjourn. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. We are adjourned.